Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jessica Stasinowski and Valerie Parashunti. Stacey Mitchell was born in Dorset, England, into a loving and close-knit family. She had an older brother and two younger sisters. At the age of 10, her family relocated from the UK to Australia. Stacey was a cheerful and friendly girl. Her father lovingly referred to her as the soul of the house because of her ability to connect with everyone. She never held grudges and always looked for ways to help her family or learn something new. She enjoyed meeting new people, was very sociable, and had a kind heart. As a teenager, Stacey became friends with two older girls she met through a mutual friend. Jessica Stasinowski was 19 and Valerie Parashunti was 21. Stacey was drawn to them because they were different from her other friends. Valerie, in particular, was fascinated by the vampire subculture and claimed to have been drinking blood since the age of 10, starting with her own and later that of others. As Stacey grew older, she began to argue more frequently with her parents. She became less interested in playing with her younger sisters and, after disagreements with her parents, would spend long periods upset, isolating herself in her room and feeling misunderstood. On December 7, 2006, Stacey turned 16 and decided to run away from home. It is common for police officers to reassure parents in such situations by saying that their children are growing up and need time with their friends, that they will return home eventually, and that there is no need to panic or take drastic actions. Stacey's parents loved her deeply and were worried, but they decided not to respond harshly. To preserve their relationship with their daughter, they chose to wait and let her stay at a friend's house for a while before involving the authorities. However, after 6 days, they reported her missing to the police on December 13, 2006. When Stacey ran away, her goal was simply to escape her home environment and let things calm down after a recent family argument. However, she wasn't sure where to go, as most of her friends still lived with their parents, and staying with them for days without raising questions wasn't feasible. That's when she thought of her new adult friends, Jessica and Valerie. Both women were older than Stacey and lived in a rented house in the suburbs with a man named David Ross John Haynes. The house was spacious and had an empty bedroom. When Stacey arrived, they offered her the spare room for just $20 per week. Stacey was thrilled because this arrangement seemed to solve her immediate problem. She moved into the empty bedroom on December 14. She appreciated the newfound freedom, no rules, no arguments, and no one monitoring her actions. Her friends, Jessica and Valerie, who were older, could also help her get alcohol if she wanted. To Stacey, this setup seemed ideal. However, officially, she was still reported missing, and her family was desperately searching for her. Despite any past disagreements, her parents deeply loved her, cared about her well-being, and wanted what was best for her. After several days of searching, Stacey's family was able to contact her on December 17, 10 days after she had run away. During a phone conversation, Stacey revealed where she was staying. Hoping to repair their relationship without causing further tension, her parents decided not to force her to return home immediately. Instead, they wanted to rebuild trust and avoid pressuring or frightening her. Stacey promised them she would come home the following day. The plan was for her to spend one final night with her friends and then return home. Her parents even arranged to meet her at the train station. The next day, Stacey's parents arrived at the station, eager to reunite with their daughter. However, Stacey was nowhere to be found. They wondered if she had changed her mind, lost trust in them, or simply decided not to return. They waited for a while, hoping she might just be running late, but eventually, they had to return home without her, overwhelmed with worry and confusion about what could have happened. When Stacey failed to show up, her parents reported the matter to the police, providing the address she had given along with the names of the people she had mentioned. It was then officially reported that Stacey had gone missing again. Just a few days later, Stacey's parents' worst fears came true. On December 21st, Stacey's remains were discovered, confirming the tragic outcome. While some reports stated that only a severed leg had been found, others claimed her entire body was recovered. In reality, Her corpse was found inside a large plastic wheelie bin behind the house. The tragedy hit even harder when Stacy's family and friends learned the horrific details surrounding her murder. It was revealed that Stacy's new friends, Jessica and Valerie, became irritated with her shortly after she arrived at their house. Stacy's cheerful demeanor, her expectation that they, as older friends, should support her, and her carefree behavior quickly wore on them. Tensions escalated as Jessica and Valerie began arguing, blaming each other for allowing Stacy to stay. They were frustrated by Stacy's habits, such as walking around in her underwear, freely entering rooms, and constantly engaging them in conversation. Their irritation deepened when another roommate, David, told Jessica and Valerie that Stacy had been making unkind remarks about his friends and criticizing their behavior. This led Valerie to conclude that Stacy was interfering with their freedom to live as they pleased. Rather than simply asking her to leave, Valerie decided that the only solution was to permanently get rid of Stacy. Jessica and Valerie began discussing their plans to kill Stacy and revealed their intentions to David. Although hesitant, David did not openly oppose their idea. He later recounted that on December 17th, he saw Jessica grinding glass in a stone bowl in the laundry room. When he asked what she was doing, Jessica openly admitted that she planned to mix the glass into Stacy's food. David pointed out that Stacy's death would be extremely painful and drawn out, as the glass could severely damage her esophagus and intestines, causing her immense suffering and loud screams that might alarm the neighbors. To carry out their plan, Stacy would need to be restrained while the glass was fed to her. They asked David to assist, but he refused. Instead, they offered him the option of simply observing. Meanwhile, Stacy had already informed her parents during a phone call that she planned to meet them on December 18th to return home. She even told David, Jessica, and Valerie about her plans, but they appeared intent on proceeding with their scheme regardless. David said he felt relieved that Stacy would soon be leaving but did nothing to dissuade Jessica and Valerie. On December 18th, Stacy missed her scheduled meeting with her parents. That evening, Stacy, Valerie, Jessica, and David went to a nearby bridge, where they entertained themselves by throwing bottles at passing cars on the highway and running away whenever they disrupted traffic. Late that night, the four returned to the house and sat at the kitchen table, drinking whiskey. Stacy complained about having a headache, so Jessica gave her a pill, claiming it was a painkiller. However, the pill was actually a sleeping aid for insomniacs. Earlier that morning, Valerie had warned David to lock himself in his bedroom and play loud music when the time came to carry out the murder, as he refused to participate. After Stacy took the pill, David noticed Valerie holding a concrete block between her legs. She then turned on music and began dancing. David retreated to his bedroom, leaving Stacy, Valerie, and Jessica in the kitchen drinking whiskey, and he played loud music to drown out the noise. Stacy tried to get up and dance with Valerie and Jessica, but Valerie told her to sit down. Soon after, David heard Jessica yell, "Right now, right now." This was followed by a loud, dull thud and Stacy's screams. Valerie had struck Stacy on the head with the concrete block. Terrified, David stayed in his room, while Jessica briefly came to check on him and found him panicking. David stated that he experienced a severe panic attack. Valerie struck Stacy multiple times with the concrete block before calling for Jessica. Jessica moved back and forth between David's room and Valerie, watching her actions from the doorway. To cover up Stacy's screams, Jessica adjusted the music in David's room, lowering the volume at times to talk to him and increasing it at other times to drown out the horrifying sounds of what was happening. Stacy screamed for help, but David remained indifferent to her pleas. At one point, Stacy crawled to the door of his bedroom, desperately clinging to it. In response, David forcefully slammed the door shut. He then told Jessica that he couldn't bear to witness what was happening and wanted to leave. To help him avoid the scene, Jessica blindfolded him with a black t-shirt and guided him past Stacy and out of the house. She instructed David to keep walking until everything was over and promised to call him later. Despite knowing that a murder was taking place inside, David chose to flee rather than intervene. Meanwhile, Valerie continued attacking Stacy with a concrete block until it broke, but she didn't stop. Eventually, Jessica joined in. She removed her belt, which had a chain attached, and used it to strangle Stacy. Though Stacy struggled fiercely, pulling at the chain and gasping for air, Jessica tightened her grip until Stacy lost consciousness. After succeeding in their plan, Valerie and Jessica celebrated, squealing with delight, hugging each other, and returning to the table to finish the leftover whiskey as part of their gruesome victory. 20 minutes later, Jessica checked Stacy's pulse and found that she was still alive. The kitchen was covered in blood, spattered on the floor and walls, so Valerie grabbed sponges and a mop to start cleaning. 30 minutes later, Jessica checked Stacy's pulse again and discovered she had died. At around 1:30 a.m., David called to ask if everything was done. Jessica confirmed Stacy was dead but explained they needed more time to clean the house and told him to keep walking for a few more hours. David spent the next 2 hours wandering around the neighborhood. While waiting for David to return, Jessica and Valerie continued cleaning the scene. Shockingly, they had filmed the murder, capturing moments of drinking, cleaning, and even mocking Stacy. They laughed, mimicked her accent, and Jessica could be seen laughing and dancing while Stacy's lifeless body lay on the floor. At 3:20 a.m., Jessica called David to let him know the house was still slightly messy but that he could return. Blindfolded once again, David was led into the room. By then, Valerie and Jessica had removed Stacy's body, hidden it in a dumpster behind the house, and started planning how to dispose of it permanently. The next morning, David and the others went to a local hardware store to buy a chainsaw and several shovels. 3 days later, on December 21st, the police showed up at their house shortly after midnight. Jessica managed to escape by running out the door, while Valerie stayed inside and gave the authorities a false name. Valerie and David claimed that Stacy had left and no one knew her whereabouts. 3 hours later, after the police identified Valerie's real name, they returned to the house. This time, only David was present. He confessed that Stacy had been killed by Valerie and Jessica and revealed the location of her body, stuffed inside a plastic container on wheels behind the house. Following their arrests, Valerie was placed in a cell with another inmate, Rochelle Van Roos. Rochelle engaged Valerie in conversation on various topics and later reported that Valerie described the murder without displaying any remorse. Instead, Valerie seemed proud of her actions, claiming that she and Jessica enjoyed themselves immensely while killing Stacy. According to Valerie, they drank and celebrated afterward, thrilled to be rid of Stacy, whom they found annoying and difficult to deal with. Later, Valerie admitted to Rochelle that Stacy had irritated them, blaming her entirely for what had happened. Valerie even disclosed that she and Jessica struck Stacy approximately 180 times during the attack. Valerie added that she regretted how quickly it all ended, wishing she'd had more time to prolong the cruel acts they inflicted on Stacy. In 2007, Jessica wrote about the murder and revealed that when Stacy was killed, she experienced an overwhelming thirst for blood, unlike anything she had felt before. She described how something within her shifted at that moment. When Stacy's blood splashed onto her, it was as if her vision became clouded, and she couldn't stop herself. Based on letters and stories from prison, it became evident that neither Jessica nor Valerie felt any remorse or shame for their actions or the impact on Stacy's family. The pain and shock of Stacy's loved ones meant nothing to them. Throughout the trial, Jessica and Valerie even laughed and mocked the situation, expressing their disdain for the whole thing. Valerie's defense attorney described her as suffering from a severe personality disorder and having endured a traumatic upbringing, including an abusive father who had served prison time for assaulting her mother. By the age of 10, Valerie had developed an obsession with the vampire subculture and a morbid fascination with drinking human blood. In March 2008, Valerie, Jessica, and David all pleaded guilty to their crime. David was sentenced to 2 years in prison, while Jessica and Valerie received life sentences in maximum security prisons, with a minimum of 24 years before becoming eligible for parole. Valerie appealed her sentence, but her appeal was unanimously rejected. The judge expressed shock at their behavior during the trial, saying that they had had over a year in custody to reflect on the horrors of their crime, yet they showed no remorse and failed to appreciate the sanctity of human life. The judge also remarked that they seemed to enjoy violence. After the trial, Valerie, Jessica, and David were sent to separate prisons. Initially, they attempted to stay connected by exchanging letters through a fellow inmate, Catherine Burney, but their communication gradually dwindled. In 2009, Valerie was involved in a prison fight, injuring 3 officers who tried to intervene. In 2013, she made an unsuccessful attempt to escape, failing even to leave the premises. Jessica, meanwhile, had 20 minor offenses cleared in 2014 after authorities deemed them insignificant compared to the severity of the crime that led to her imprisonment. The cleared charges included 18 counts of riding public transportation without a ticket, 1 count of drinking in a vehicle, and 1 count of smoking in a prohibited area, offenses that the court categorized as trivial. Stacy's family continues to mourn her tragic loss, grappling with a profound sense of guilt for not being able to protect her. Years after Stacy's passing, her father shared with journalists the enduring pain of losing his daughter. He said that they thought about it every day and wondered if something could have been done differently. He expressed sorrow, saying that Stacy could have had a child by then, and he often imagined what that child might have looked like. He added that it was heartbreaking knowing they would never see her again. Stacy's older brother, who was just 2 years her senior, eventually moved back to Britain following her death. He explained that staying in the place where his sister's life ended was unbearable, calling her death utterly senseless. He reflected on the deep pain of realizing that Stacy had been close to returning to her family, only to now confront the devastating reality that she was gone forever. The haunting story of 2 individuals who took pleasure in ending a young girl's life remains difficult to comprehend. After a quarrel with her parents, Stacy sought solace in her older friends, who offered no support but instead dismissed her, saying she irritated them. One of these individuals, David, was described as timid and prone to panic attacks. At the time of the murder, he allegedly wandered aimlessly around the neighborhood instead of intervening to stop the crime. He had the opportunity, plenty of time, to call the police, a single act that might have saved Stacy's life. Many feel that David's punishment does not adequately reflect his role in the tragedy. What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lauren McCluskey. Since she was a child, Lauren McCluskey has been a very talented person. She dances, sings, and is an excellent track and field athlete. She has won many medals and awards. Eventually, she received an offer from the University of Utah and left her hometown of Pullman, Washington, to start a new life in Salt Lake City. At the university, she participates in athletics competitions, including the 100-meter dash, hurdles, high jump, shot put, long jump, javelin throw, and 800-meter run. Her talent made her one of the standout athletes on the university team. Besides, she also studies well in the communication department and makes friends with many people. However, in September 2018, her life took a tragic turn. On a Friday evening, Lauren and her friends decided to go dancing and have drinks at a small club near the University of Utah. During the evening, a man caught her attention. As the night wound down, he introduced himself as Sean Phillips, saying he worked as a security guard at the club and was also a student at Salt Lake Community College. He was 28 years old. Despite their age difference, but they quickly found common ground. His charm and interest in her drew her in, and they exchanged phone numbers, planning to meet again the following day to spend more time together. Lauren felt very happy to meet Sean. She even called her mother, Jill McCluskey, to tell her about him. Sean gives her flowers at dinner, tries to be charming and gently proposes. He was tall, muscular, handsome, and very sociable guy. He quickly found common ground with Lauren, an energetic and friendly girl. He often stayed overnight in her dorm room, and she even let him borrow her car. However, some concerning behaviors began to surface. Initially, Sean encouraged Lauren to invite her friends to their gatherings, but then, he started telling her how to dress, usually in a t-shirt and jeans. When she was with her friends, He would constantly call, asking where she was, who she was with, and when she would return. If she didn't respond immediately, he would become upset. Lauren explained to friends that Sean's behavior stemmed from insecurities caused by past relationships and believed that over time, this would improve. Sean begins to explain to Lauren the importance of being careful around others and always being prepared for unfortunate situations that may arise. He bought her a can of pepper spray and insisted she carry it everywhere. He also took her to a shooting range and asked her to purchase a gun for him. Around this time, Lauren cut off all communication with her friends and spent all her time outside of school with Sean, focusing solely on training with him. Concerned, her friends reached out to the dorm staff where she lived. The staff, already uneasy about Sean's frequent presence in the dorms, grew even more alarmed when they discovered that he was tracking Lauren's movements on campus, monitoring her comings and goings. It became evident that he was not just overly jealous but was attempting to control and manipulate Lauren's life. Something was clearly wrong. As it turned out, Sean was not who he had introduced himself to be. One day, Lauren accidentally saw a photo of his ID card and learned the truth. Sean Phillips was not a 28-year-old college student or the kind, trustworthy person he pretended to be. His real name was Melvin Sean Rowland, and in fact he is 38 years old, born in 1981. He was skilled at fabricating stories and concealing his true identity. Investigators later uncovered several women who had been deceived by his lies in different ways. Unknowingly, Lauren had become one of his victims. After seeing his ID card, she begins to realize the truth about him. Melvin's true identity came to light on October 5th when Lauren returned to her home in Pullman, Washington. She confided in a friend, sharing everything that had happened. The friend suggested searching online for information about Melvin Sean Rowland. The search revealed alarming details. Melvin was a sex offender. In 2004, he was convicted of luring a minor and attempting to forcibly harass her. He spent 9 years in state prison and was released on parole in September 2013. Realizing the truth, Lauren knew she had to end the relationship with him. Lauren returns to college in Utah and makes plans to break up with Melvin. On October 9th, she called and asked him to come over. When he arrived, the planned breakup didn't happen, and he stayed the night in Lauren's room. She later told her friends that Melvin had apologized for lying about himself and explained an incident involving a false age claim by a girl at a fraternity party. He insisted that the other allegations against him were untrue. Lauren's friends were doubtful of his story and urged her to end the relationship, which she did the following day. Afterward, Lauren called her mother to explain what had happened. She mentioned that she planned to meet Melvin that evening to get her car back. Her mother, Jill, grew very concerned about the situation. Worrying about her daughter's safety, Jill contacted campus police to inform them and asked them to keep an eye on Lauren while she got her car back. Jill felt uneasy and deeply anxious. Jill, dreading the idea of Melvin, who seemed to bring trouble into Lauren's life, being anywhere near she. Lauren was able to pick up her car without any issues, and both she and Melvin carried on with their lives. After that, she had a short period of peace. She focused on her studies and began to rebuild her routine. However, this peace is soon broken by messages sent from unknown phone numbers, all referencing Melvin. Concerned, she contacted the police, leaving a message with the operator, but no one got back to her that day. Then a message arrived from Melvin's number, saying he was fine, but hinting that something strange was happening. Soon after, messages from anonymous numbers continued to arrive, affirmed that they were in possession of sensitive photos of Lauren and Melvin. The sender demanded $10,000, threatening to release the photos online if they do not receive the money. On the morning of October 13th, Melvin emailed Lauren, revealing that he was also being blackmailed. He advised her to pay the money, so she sent $10,000 to the unknown blackmailer. However, she began to suspect that Melvin himself might be behind the blackmail rather than an unknown party. Feeling insecure, she contacted the University of Utah police. The dispatcher forwarded her complaint to Miguel Dasso, a University of Utah police officer. Wanting to address the situation directly, Lauren and her friend walked across campus to speak with the officer in person. When they arrived, they met with the police and told the whole story, including giving Melvin's name and that he was a sex offender. Police believe this was a hoax and that Lauren may have made up the story about the death threat. Lauren and her friend believed that they had taken the necessary steps and that the problem would soon be resolved. Unfortunately, almost no action was taken. Officer Miguel received copies of the messages and images involved, even adding one of the photos to his personal collection. He later bragged to another officer that he could now view it whenever he wanted. Lauren received no follow-up from the university police despite her repeated calls to the station, during which she explained to the dispatcher that she was being blackmailed again. In October, near Lauren's dorm, Melvin was spotted loitering in the parking lot, wearing a suit. About 45 minutes later, she returned to her dorm after track practice. At the time, no one knew who Melvin was. She entered the dorm and went upstairs. Shortly afterward, Melvin, now dressed as Deadpool, approached the dorm door. He later claimed he knew Lauren had called the police, leading her to suspect that someone at the police department had informed him about the situation. Lauren had forgotten that a few weeks ago, she had used Melvin's phone to log in and check her email. This gave him access to her communications with the police, friends, and family without her realizing it. She contacted the Salt Lake City police, hoping they could connect her with another department for assistance. However, under the jurisdictional rules, police said they were not of much help, as their jurisdiction was limited to campus. This also prevents Officer Miguel from taking action outside of campus. Additionally, some have suggested that Lauren's assumption that someone in the police department had leaked information to Melvin may make her paranoid. Phone records revealed that she called both police departments multiple times over several days, desperately seeking a solution. On October 22, the situation took a dire turn. CCTV footage showed Melvin leaving his apartment at 6 a.m. He rented a car from his neighbor and drove to the parking lot in front of Lauren's dorm, arriving at 9 a.m. He walked toward the building just as she was leaving her dorm. Around that time, she received a text message, supposedly from Deputy Chief McLennan of the University Police, asking her to come to the station to review evidence. Sensing something was off, she ignored the message and instead went to meet with a counselor, who had been helping her deal with the breakup and its aftermath. At that time, Melvin was in the same building as Lauren. He was carrying a small suitcase. He was looking for she but couldn't find her, so he went to her dorm instead. There, he managed to gain access. Once inside, he spoke with a group of 4 students. Over time, 3 of them left, leaving 1 student behind. The remaining student later told police that Melvin asked if he wanted to see what was inside the suitcase. Inside was a .40 caliber Beretta pistol and a full magazine. He even let the student handle the gun before leaving. Meanwhile, Lauren had finished her evening class and was preparing to return to her dorm. It had been a difficult week, so she decided to call her parents and take a short walk across campus while talking to them. At the same time, Melvin left the dorm, intending to intercept her on her usual route back. As Lauren walked, she told her parents about her day, and they listened closely. Suddenly, they heard her scream as Melvin began chasing her. Her father, Matthew, immediately called 911. Melvin grabbed Lauren, forced her into the car with a gun and pushed her into the back seat. Then, he shooting her 7 times at close range. After opening fire, he drove through the parking lot, crossed the bridge and continued straight to the nearest subway station in Salt Lake. There, he waited calmly at a bus stop and made a phone call, having already arranged for someone to pick him up. A woman eventually arrived, and he got into her car. The two went out for dinner and took a walk around a nearby building, attempting to appear as though they were casually spending time together, likely to create an alibi for the time of the murder. Meanwhile, police began searching the area. This side, Lauren's parents are dying to know what's going on with their daughter. Students and volunteers began searching west of the North Medical Tower. A team of 6 officers, along with a police dog, joined the search, moving north. Eventually, they discovered Lauren's body inside a silver vehicle. Police cordoned off the crime scene and initiated a nationwide manhunt for Melvin. Authorities had been repeatedly warned that he posed a danger to Lauren, but by the time they acted, it was too late. Now, their only focus was capturing her killer, Melvin. At this time, Melvin was still on the run. He rushed into Trinity Church in Salt Lake City to seek refuge. Police followed him into the building. They also knew that he had weapons and ready to fight back. They searched the church room by room until a single gunshot rang out. Melvin ended his life. When officers found him, the manhunt ended. However, the tragedy was far from over. Lauren, an innocent young woman, was murdered, causing people to demand clarity on the matter. Why had no one taken even the simplest measures to prevent this? How could someone who had pleaded for help and provided all the necessary information be so blatantly ignored? The university had failed to conduct even a basic background check on Melvin. Why hadn't they done so? If they had looked into his history and contacted his probation officer, he will be sent back to prison soon. He has been incarcerated for violating the terms of his probation and has a history of making provocative statements during his parole hearings. When reporters asked Melvin's parole officer if he could have been sent back to prison, the officer made it clear Melvin would have been arrested immediately if the police department informed them of his actions. Officer Miguel Dasso has left the University of Utah Police Force to join the Logan Police Department. However, after his actions came to light, he was promptly fired. Under state obscenity laws, he faces charges for mishandling evidence and showing it to another officer. These charges were later dropped because a data analysis of his phone showed insufficient evidence. Although the charges were dismissed, his actions caused significant harm. What is particularly troubling is that the district attorney has decided not to proceed with the case against him. The case also raises questions about where Melvin got the gun he used. As a parolee and convicted felon, he was legally prohibited from purchasing or possessing a firearm. Investigations revealed that he acquired the gun through a friend, who was also a convicted felon. The friend had his girlfriend purchase the gun on Melvin's behalf. If the gun had not been handed to Lauren would likely still be alive. The McCluskey family sued the University of Utah and its police force, accusing them of being irresponsible and incompetent in handling Lauren's request for help. The lawsuits, initially seeking $56 million, were resolved through settlements. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Monica McCarrick. Tori and her twin sister Lily Ball were born in September 2007 to parents Monica McCarrick and Michael Ball, who lived in San Diego, California. Their relationship was difficult from the start, partly due to their 10-year age gap. Monica struggled with substance abuse, which often led to her run-ins with the police. In 2006, she was arrested for domestic violence and given probation, but her aggressive behavior continued, eventually leading to the couple's divorce. Following the split, Michael filed for custody of the twins in 2009. Monica's life took a new turn. She began dating Robert Paulson, her first love. They had been friends for over 10 years, and their long-distance relationship began on Thanksgiving Day 2009 when Monica discovered her ex's social media page and contacted him. They began communicating as friends. However, Robert was in a relationship with another girl named Jill. In April 2010, a tragic event occurred when Jill took her own life with Robert's gun. Robert had a passion for guns and owned a collection that included a samurai sword and an agile rifle. After this heartbreaking incident, Monica supported Robert through his grief and they became closer, eventually starting a romantic relationship. In May 2010, Monica and the children moved to Pennsylvania. Their romance progressed quickly, leading to their engagement just days later. Monica was very happy during this time. She became a devoted mother, worked as a manager at a dental office, and pursued further education. Robert was also happy, and it seemed like their lives were improving. Unfortunately, this story would not have a happy ending. In August 2010, Monica and Robert moved to California while still planning their wedding. They rented an apartment in a residential area in Fairfield. Monica was looking for a school for her daughters and had obtained her license to practice dentistry. Robert supported her and admired her dedication as a mother to ensuring a good future for her daughters. He appreciated her calm demeanor. Robert worked for a film crew, which required him to travel for filming, resulting in him being absent for long periods of time. On September 9, 2010, just a month after moving to California, Robert was called away on a long business trip to film a movie in Minnesota. This left him with no choice but to leave, which upset Monica. She was not ready to let him go, as she still had unresolved issues from the move and wanted to improve their life together. Monica nevertheless agreed to let Robert go on the business trip. At first, everything seemed fine, but about 3 weeks after he left, Robert began to notice that Monica's behavior had changed significantly. She began to act very strangely. Monica discovers a script written by Robert that depicts a horror story about a man who chases children down a beach, ultimately leading to their deaths. Monica understands that the script is about her family and fears for her children's safety. However, Robert denied all of this. Robert insisted that it was a work of fiction related to his work. Throughout Robert's business trip, Monica frequently brought up her concerns in conversation. Eventually, she began to claim that Robert's previous girlfriend had died because of him. Monica suspected that Robert was involved with another woman at the time and believed that his affair contributed to his ex-girlfriend's tragic decision. Robert spent hours on the phone and texting Monica to calm her down. Unfortunately, this only worked for a short time before she began to express new suspicions. People who came into contact with her during this time noticed her paranoid behavior. Monica wanted Robert to stay home and objected to his long business trips. Robert reassured her that his trip to Minnesota would be over soon and that she was eagerly awaiting his return. On the day before his return, Robert's manager informed him that he would need to stay in Alaska for another 5 to 10 days to finish filming, as they had found the ideal location for some of the missing scenes. When he shared this news with Monica, she became extremely upset. She tried her best to convince him to return home with her and the children, saying that she could not handle the situation on her own. Although she pleaded for help, Robert felt helpless and asked her to be patient a little longer. Monica was not completely alone, her family supported her. However, Robert noticed that her mental state seemed unstable. Her friends, who remained in contact with her during this time, often mentioned this in their conversations. On September 25, Monica contacted her friend Regina, expressing that she feared for her life. Monica truly believed that Robert and his mother might harm her. She asked Regina to contact the police if anything happened to her. That same day, Monica contacted her friend Maritza to express her concerns about Robert and his family. She stressed that she felt unsafe and feared for the safety of her children. Maritza called her to discuss the matter further. During the conversation, Monica shared that her suspicions were related to a script Robert had written that depicted a murder involving a woman and her children. Maritza reassured Monica, and for a moment things seemed to calm down, but the calm did not last long. Maritza received another alarming text message 3 days later, on September 29th. In this message, Monica claimed that someone wanted to kidnap her children and harm her. She also contacted another friend, Pamela, expressing her fear that Robert intended to harm her. Monica was genuinely afraid for her safety, but she also hoped that her fears were paranoid. She stressed that if she or her children went missing, it was important to contact the police and hold Robert accountable. Unfortunately, Pamela was unable to visit Monica this time because she was in another city visiting her mother. The conversation ended with Monica declaring her intention to go to the police to prove Robert's involvement in the murder of his ex-girlfriend, Jill. However, many of her text messages were inconsistent. She expressed stress about raising her children, feeling overwhelmed by having to deal with the problems on her own. This confused the Pamela, who knew that Robert worked hard to provide for the family. At the same time, Monica often mentioned her desire to be free, to relax, and to enjoy herself. Michael often took the Tori and Lily out, giving Monica a chance to relax. She also had many friends and family to lean on. Not everyone was able to respond immediately to Monica when a problem arose, but they were able to reach her within a few hours to offer their support. They constantly help her. Friends and acquaintances noted that in Pennsylvania, Monica was much calmer and handled everyday problems well, even when she was alone. However, when she moved to California, where all her relatives and friends lived, she became panicky about Robert's absence. From September 29th to October 4th, 2010, Monica and her children traveled to San Diego to visit their mother. During this visit, she shared a script written by Robert, which frightened her. She was also concerned about the many weapons stored in the home. She feared that Robert intended to harm them with these weapons and discussed her concerns with her mother. Monica was clearly nervous and anxious about her upcoming wedding. However, after she and her daughters went shopping for wedding dresses, her mood changed. Monica seemed happy and excited, taking many pictures of the dress she had chosen and sending them to friends and family, including one to her grandmother, Terry Faye. They had a close relationship, with her grandmother visiting regularly and supporting her. On October 11th, Monica called her grandmother Terry again and expressed her fear of losing her daughter and her concerns for her own safety. However, during this call, Terry noticed that Monica's behavior was unusual. Monica's situation is confusing. She has moved across the country in search of a better life, hoping to be closer to her family. Her goal is to marry Robert and build a life with him and their children. However, she frequently expresses fears for her safety, especially around Robert. Despite her fear of Robert, she pursues the marriage. Meanwhile, Michael is fighting for custody of their twins. Robert's mother, Roxanne, became increasingly concerned about Monica. While her son was away, she noticed that Monica was losing control. Monica handled things well at first, but as time went on, her instability became more apparent. Roxanne often takes Tori and Lily for walks, giving Monica time to rest. Occasionally, Monica and the children would visit Roxanne. An alarming incident occurred while Monica was sleeping at Roxanne's house. She suddenly woke up around 3 in the morning and began to prepare for something. Roxanne heard a noise and went outside to check what was going on. Monica pointed to a car parked on the street near her house, believing that someone was following her, which made her very nervous. Roxanne, knowing the owner of the car, tried to reassure Monica. The car belonged to a neighbor who had just returned home late from work. He had lived in the area for a long time, was a devoted family man and did not pose any threat to them. Monica's concerns did not subside, so she took her daughters and went home, insisting she did not feel safe. When she returned home, she began to feel more comfortable. The next morning, she informed Robert's mother, Roxanne, that she was feeling fine. In the afternoon, She called Roxanne at work, saying that a delivery man had come to her house and hinted that he might be part of a plot to harm her. Despite Roxanne's attempts to calm her down, Monica remained restless. She then tried to call her mother, but her mother was at work and could not talk for long. Her mother reassured Monica to calm down. Monica replied that everything was fine and then ended the call. The next morning, October 12th, the neighborhood manager came to Monica's apartment to ask her to move her car. She parked her car blocking several other parking spaces. When the manager knocked on the door, Monica was too scared to open it. After a long conversation through the door, Monica finally agreed to open the door and go outside to park her car properly. During this time, the manager noticed that Monica's two daughters, Tori and Lily, were in the apartment and they seemed okay. Monica called in to take time off work so she could get a new hairstyle for her wedding. While she was on the phone, her manager noticed a child crying in the background. Robert later spoke to Monica on the phone and via text messages. He found her messages confusing and included some inappropriate quotes. From what he could understand, it sounded like she was talking about children. One message read, "Let the bunnies go away forever." Robert understood this to be a reference to the custody battle involving Monica's ex-husband, Michael, who was seeking full custody. It was likely that the court would award custody to Michael, which would mean that Lily and Tori could be separated from Monica. With her past issues with substance abuse and mental health, she was at risk of losing her parental rights. However, Robert was busy and didn't think much of the message. That evening, Monica and Robert spoke on the phone. Monica was very difficult to understand, speaking very quickly and seeming to move around her apartment, with a lot of background noise. She hung up several times but called back immediately. She insisted that whatever had happened should be considered an accident. It was unclear what she meant, but her tone was very disturbing. Monica also mentioned that she had planned to start a fire with her children. Suddenly, the fire alarm went off, and he heard Monica scream before the call abruptly ended. Worried, Robert kept calling Monica, but no one answered. Worried, he contacted the police to check on her. It felt like a horrible nightmare, but he had no idea that the situation was much more horrifying than he could have imagined. Monica fed Tori and Lily and tied them to high chairs. She then took a samurai sword from the wall in Robert's office and began to violently attack the children. Within minutes, Monica had killed Tori and Lily and used their bodies to barricade the apartment door before setting the apartment on fire. The neighbors only heard the children's short cries and some noises, which did not arouse any suspicion. When the fire alarm rang, it was too late. The downstairs neighbor noticed smoke coming from the apartment above and called the police. After calling, he quickly ran upstairs and broke down the door, but it wouldn't open. He then tried to enter through the sliding window of the third-floor apartment. Luckily, he was able to reach the window and get in. The room was filled with thick smoke, making it difficult to see. When the neighbor entered the area where the tragic incident with the children took place, the entire floor was covered in blood, and there was a sword and a medicine bottle on the ground, which could have been the murder weapon. Unfortunately, it was too late to save Tori and Lily. When police arrived, they were unable to enter the home immediately because the children's bodies were blocking the front door. After some struggle, they were able to get inside. The entire apartment was filled with smoke, and the fire was in the pantry next to the front door. After the fire was extinguished and the smoke cleared, the rescue team discovered the children's bodies. They also found Monica, who was unconscious and had suffered multiple serious injuries that appeared to be self-inflicted. Monica was rushed to the medical center in critical condition. Her injuries included lacerations to her neck and hands, several severed fingers, and severed tendons. Both ankles were injured, and there was a deep wound to her thigh. During a search of the apartment, police found several weapons, including a loaded rifle, a shotgun, and a loaded pistol. A significant amount of live ammunition was discovered in the hallway, along with a sword and a lighter that Monica used to start a fire in the pantry. 2 high chairs, which were overturned and covered in blood, indicated that the children were eating when the murder occurred, as trays with plates and food were found scattered on the floor. A laptop displaying cartoons was in front of them. The kitchen table was also smeared with blood, suggesting that there was an attempt to clean it hurriedly. Additionally, a thrilling novel by James Patterson about a serial killer was opened to a page that read, "My daughter died." During the analysis of the vial, forensic experts found no dangerous or powerful drugs. During the autopsy, they discovered multiple injuries on Tori and Lily. Tori had 11 cuts on her face and deep wounds on the front of her neck. On her chest, there were 9 shallow cuts and 2 stab wounds. One punctured her lung and the other punctured her heart. Lily had multiple injuries, including 5 cuts on her face and neck and 9 cuts on her chest, including one so severe that it nearly severed her head. The sword had severed Lily's larynx and arteries. The children's arms were the most injured, suggesting the twins had attempted to defend themselves. None of the girls inhaled smoke from the fire, indicating that they were already dead when the fire started, as there was no soot in their lungs. The brutality of their murders shocked all the experts involved in the case. Shortly after being released from the hospital, 27-year-old Monica was arrested and charged with 2 counts of premeditated murder, arson, attempting to destroy evidence, and obstructing the investigation. Confined to a wheelchair and covered in bandages, she appeared in court on October 26, 2010, where she did not plead guilty. Monica argued that her crime was a result of insanity, leading to her being sent for a psychiatric evaluation from October 2010 to June 2011. A prison psychiatrist met with her more than 10 times, spending around 20 hours in discussions, conducting various psychological tests, reviewing her medical records, and speaking with her family members. The psychiatrist found that when Monica was 14, she had displayed similar self-harming behaviors. At that time, she was diagnosed with a type of attention deficit disorder and prescribed medication to manage it. However, she did not complete her treatment and later began abusing illegal drugs, which resulted in her developing bipolar disorder. The Monica stated that she started drinking alcohol at 12 and began using marijuana at 14, which ultimately led to her becoming addicted to illegal drugs by 18. From 2003 to 2005, she was diagnosed with depression while living in San Diego and received professional psychiatric treatment. After Robert went on a business trip, she relapsed and used drugs throughout September and October 2010. Monica reported experiencing paranoid thoughts, common in heavy users. She confessed to her psychiatrist that she had been heavily intoxicated in the 4 days before the crime. Monica often told her doctor that her addiction made it difficult for her to communicate with her children. As a result, she often tried to stay away from them, sometimes leaving them with strangers. She called her loved ones several times, seeking their help, and they tried to support her. However, the psychiatrist revealed that Monica's problems were not only due to illegal drugs. In the days leading up to the tragic event, she experienced delusions, paranoia, and feelings of being persecuted. She believed that Robert and his mother were planning to kidnap her daughters and torture them, a fear that was heightened by a story Robert wrote. In prison, she told a psychiatrist that she had read in a book the exact time that the attackers would arrive to try to enslave her daughter. The psychiatrist recognized this as a symptom known as reference ideas, in which the patient believes that ordinary events contain hidden messages. Monica was convinced that certain events were destined to happen. Monica believed that this was a sign that her children would be enslaved. In her desperation to save Tori and Lily, she realized that even if she saved them from Robert, she could still lose them if her ex-husband Michael won custody in court. This led her to the tragic conclusion that her daughters needed to be killed, which she did. However, despite her serious actions, her thought process showed that she was still quite sane despite some mental health issues. She planned to barricade the door so that it could not be opened immediately and only set it on fire after killing her children, with the intention of covering up what had happened. Another psychiatrist, after speaking with Monica, concluded that she was not fully aware of her actions. He believed that Monica thought she was saving her children when she brutally killed them. On October 25, 2011, while in prison, Monica confided to a fellow inmate that she was hearing voices. By November, she began to have paranoid thoughts, fearing that she would be attacked. In April 2012, she overdosed while still incarcerated. Monica reported using illegal drugs, and prison guards observed that she drank up to 12 cups of coffee a day, which worsened her mental state. She frequently expressed concerns about threats to her life from prison gangs and often attempted to communicate with doctors and other professionals. But her reports were inconsistent, unclear, and sometimes completely false. Her psychological evaluation hearings dragged on. Michael attended the trial and asked not to show mercy to the Monica who'd taken the lives of the babies. The final decision was up to the jury. After hours of deliberation, they concluded that Monica had intentionally killed Tori and Lily. On June 15, 2012, Monica McCarrick was convicted of first-degree murder. The jury sentenced Monica to 2 consecutive life terms in state prison without the possibility of parole. During her trial, she cried. She told the court that she was praying for everyone's well-being despite her own deteriorating condition. Monica expressed that she loved her daughters. Monica is currently serving her sentence in a California prison and has attempted to appeal her sentence multiple times. On August 22, 2019, an online petition was started, urging the governor of California to overturn Monica's sentence. The petition claims that nearly all psychiatric experts who have reviewed her case believe she was not aware of her actions when the crime occurred. However, as of now, only 144 people have signed the petition, and Monica is still incarcerated. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Samia Shahid, Chaudhry Mohammad Shahid, and Mitiyaz Shahid left their small village of Pandori in the Jhelum district of Punjab, Pakistan, in the mid-1980s to escape poverty and seek a better life. They immigrated to the UK, and in November 1987, their first child, Samia, was born in Bradford, West Yorkshire. A few years later, they welcomed their second child, a daughter named Mada. Shahid started a car rental business, which eventually grew to specialize in luxury vehicles, including limousines. As the business prospered, he helped 2 of his brothers and their families relocate from Pakistan to the UK. The Shahid family was well known and successful in Bradford, recognized for their wealth and influence. Shahid's brothers started and grew their businesses successfully. By the early 2000s, one brother owned a seafood shop chain, while the other ran a flower delivery and floristry business. Sisters Samia and Mada were born and raised in England, growing up in an interference of European and Pakistani cultures. However, their family strictly adheres to the traditions and laws of their homeland Pakistan. This created a sharp contrast between the liberal English lifestyle and the rigid rules imposed by their family. For instance, the girls were not permitted to drive, and their father closely monitored all their activities and interactions. The eldest daughter, Samia, was Shahid's pride and is considered Daddy's favorite daughter. He pampered her, buying her expensive clothes, jewelry, and let her study at the most prestigious university. She took great care of her appearance, using high-end cosmetics, go to beauty salons, and spend a lot of money there. Although she worked part-time at a post office, her lifestyle was primarily funded by her father, who fulfilled all her wishes. Secretly, Samia would sometimes rent a car and drive herself, as she loved driving and felt confident behind the wheel. She couldn't understand why Pakistani traditions restricted women from driving. Independent and strong-willed, she valued her freedom, but still made an effort to follow her parents' wishes and avoid upsetting them. Samia had many friends from university in England and stayed in touch with them. She was known for being bright, kind, and cheerful. Despite leading a life full of love and abundance, and seemingly having everything she could want, but she lacked the freedom to make her own decisions. She always acts according to the opinions of her parents and elder members of the family. Above all, she feared disappointing her father, whom she deeply admired. Yet, the strict rules, fears, and prohibitions in her life meant she could never truly be honest with her family. In 2012, Samia's parents decided it was time for she to marry, start a family, and have children. They insisted she travel to Pakistan to enter into a marriage that followed their cultural traditions. They chose her cousin, Shakil, as their son-in-law, a man she barely knew. Marriages between relatives and arranged unions are common in their culture. Samia had always known her parents would eventually select a husband for her, presenting it as a decision she could not refuse. She had resigned herself to this inevitability, but her father's choice left her deeply shocked. Samia found Shakil repulsive and could not imagine marrying him. To make matters worse, he had recently been released from prison after serving time for killing someone in a land dispute. Although Samia had interacted with him occasionally during childhood and had seen him as a brother figure, the idea of him as her husband was unthinkable. Her parents, who were also cousins in an arranged marriage, had fallen in love and built a happy life together. They believed the same would happen for Samia and Shakil, assuming love would grow over time. Despite her strong aversion to the match, Samia felt she couldn't defy her father and understood how much this marriage meant to her family. Her mother and younger sister Mata later asserted that no one forced her into the marriage. They thought that with her stubborn personality, they could not force her either physically or emotionally. According to them, she married willingly and of her own choice. In early February 2012, the decision about her upcoming wedding was finalized during a family meeting. In the weeks that followed, her parents, along with her aunt and uncle, who were also her future in-laws, took her shopping. She was able to choose anything she wanted: costly outfits, jewelry, accessories, cosmetics, and more, and they covered all the expenses. Outwardly, she feigned excitement of wedding preparations, but inwardly, she felt trapped. She already knew this marriage would not bring her happiness, but would instead feel like a punishment. Her true feelings could only be shared with her friends, not her family. At home, she had to maintain the appearance of joy, actively in discussing the wedding details, and prepare herself for her relocation to Pakistan. On February 20, 2012, Samia boarded a plane. She texted a close friend, telling her that she was about to fly thousands of miles to make the biggest mistake of her life, but she had no other choice. Later, she sent more messages, admitting that the very sight of the groom made her feel sick and that being near him was unbearable. On February 27th, Samia and Shakil had a grand wedding at Pandori, attended by around 1,000 guests. The wedding lasted 4 days, and as a wedding gift, Samia's parents gave she and Shakil a luxurious 2-story house located. However, Samia quickly realized that this beautiful house would feel like a prison, where she would be forced to live with a man she did not love. After returning to the United Kingdom, married life brought Samia no happiness. She still despised her husband, Shakil, and knew she could never love him. 4 months later, in mid-June 2012, she went back to her hometown of Bradford to handle some matters and assist Shakil with his immigration paperwork to apply for British citizenship. She planned to apply for a spousal visa for Shakil, but she postponed it to enjoy the feeling of freedom and have some time away from a husband she did not love. When Samia began processing the documents, she discovered that their wedding ceremony, conducted in full accordance with Sharia law, was only considered a marriage contract between Muslims and held no legal validity in the United Kingdom. To make the marriage legally recognized, it was necessary to follow European legal procedures, such as having a civil ceremony and obtaining an official marriage certificate. After returning from Pakistan, Samia's friends noticed significant changes in her personality and behavior. She seemed sad, her eyes were dull, and she was no longer the cheerful, sociable person they knew. It was clear she felt deep resentment toward her parents. Any discussion about her husband or married life made her uncomfortable and angry. The root of the problem was Shakil's extreme jealousy. Even from another country, he tormented Samia by constantly calling her and demanding video chats at any time. This allowed him to monitor her whereabouts, activities, and the people she was with. His behavior was not only a way to control her, but also a demonstration of his dominance and authority over her. In early August of that year, during a phone call with a close friend, Samia admitted that she was at her breaking point. She felt completely drained, had lost all joy and hope for happiness or a bright future, and no longer wanted to live. She expressed deep hatred for Shakil, saying she never wanted to see him again. However, she couldn't share these feelings with her family because they were busy bragging to everyone about the lavish wedding they had prepared for her. In early September, unable to resolve issues related to the marriage visa, Samia was forced to return to Pakistan to live with the husband she disliked, Shakil. She wrote frequently to friends, describing her misery, her distaste for her marriage, and her feeling of being trapped with no way out. This lasted for a few months, but then she started complaining less, and her mood gradually changed. During her next visit to the United Kingdom, the reason for this change became clear. Samia had met a young man online named Syed Mukhtar Kazim, a British citizen of Pakistani descent like herself. Syed was born and raised in London, but had been living and working in the United Arab Emirates for several years. The two began corresponding and quickly developed feelings for each other. They secretly meet, and in October 2013, they saw each other in person for the first time. Samia immediately realized that Syed was the man she wanted to spend her life with. He was kind, caring, attentive, and treated her with love and respect. They have many interests in common, but also understand the dangers in their relationship. Despite this, they felt that life only had meaning when they were together. Samia shared her situation with her beloved Syed and expressed her willingness to end her marriage to start a new life with him. However, she could not get a divorce in a British court because under local law, she was not recognized as married. In the spring of 2014, Samia decided to confront Shakil and asked him for a divorce. He refused rudely, declaring that she would remain his until the end of her life. During another visit to the United Kingdom to see her parents, Samia secretly reached out to a local Islamic Sharia council, explaining that she had been forced into the marriage, which was grounds for annulment. She also converted from Sunni Islam to Shiite Islam, the religion Syed now practices. When the cleric from the council contacted Shakil to hear his perspective on their marriage, he once again refused to cooperate, angrily declaring that he would not consent to a divorce. Afterward, the Islamic Sharia Council of the United Kingdom annulled Samia's marriage, acknowledging that she had been forced into it due to family pressure. Her family was unaware that she had divorced Shakil and was planning to remarry, this time to the man she truly loved, Syed. In September 2014, Samia secretly married Syed. Unlike the previous marriage, this marriage was legally recognized, and they also received a marriage certificate to confirm its legality. The cleric who approved the annulment of her first marriage was also the one who presided over the nikah ceremony. Only a few close friends attended the intimate wedding. Samia and Syed was overjoyed. Samia confided in her friends that she felt like a princess in a fairy tale and could hardly believe her happiness was real. Sadly, this happy moment turned out to be the beginning of a nightmare. and eventually led to exile. When her ex-husband, Shakil, demanded that she return to Pakistan, she informed him that she was no longer his wife and presented her new marriage certificate. Enraged, Shakil immediately contacted Samia's father, igniting a major family scandal. Her family tried to pressure her into returning to he, even resorting to threats, but she refused. This thing led to dire consequences. A few weeks later, while shopping with her younger sister, Samia was brutally attacked on the street. Her sister was left unharmed, but she was severely beaten with metal bars and narrowly avoided having her legs broken. Although police took her statement, but the identity of the attackers remained unknown, and the case was soon closed. At this time, Syed had to travel to Dubai for work, leaving his wife, Samia, in the United Kingdom, where she was waiting for a visa to join him. The waiting period was agonizing for her, filled with threats, conflicts with her relatives, and fears for her safety. Her parents tried to prove that her divorce from Shakil was valid, and even confronted the cleric who had officiated her marriage to Syed. Samia's mother was especially enraged, hurling insults at her daughter, accusing her of disgracing the family, and warning that she would face severe consequences. In the spring of 2015, Samia finally received her visa and was able to join Syed in Dubai. For her, it felt like an escape, as she feared her family would do everything in their power to prevent her from leaving and force her to return to Pakistan. To protect herself, she entrusted her passport to friends, who also purchased her plane ticket and accompanied her to the airport to ensure her safe departure. A new chapter of Samia's life began. The following year was the happiest of her life. She lives with Syed, the man she loves, who always cherishes and treats her with care. For the first time, she could drive a car, something her parents and former husband Shakil would never have allowed. In photos she shared on social media, she appeared radiant, confident, and more beautiful than ever. It was clear she was living the life she had always dreamed of. She hoped to become a mother soon, but unfortunately, that dream was not realized. Despite this, she and Syed remained optimistic about the future, planning their life together, unaware that her family had decided against her. Shortly after Samia left, her parents filed a missing persons report with the police, which they later attempted to reclassify as an abduction, accusing Syed of kidnapping her. Meanwhile, Shakil's family began plotting ways to force she to return. They realized that threatening her was no longer effective, but they still believed they could exploit her emotions and compassion to manipulate her. In June 2016, Samia received devastating news. Her aunt, Shakil's mother, had passed away. Heartbroken, Samia considered traveling to Pakistan for the funeral, but knew it could be dangerous. Many relatives still resent her for divorcing Shakil and remarrying Syed. Her actions were seen as treacherous and shameful. A week after the funeral, her mother called again with more distressing news. Her father's health had sharply declined. He was diabetic, and his condition had become critical. Samia feared that if he passed away, she could never forgive herself for not visiting him. Despite her own worries and Syed's dissuasion, she decides to go to Pakistan. Concerned for her safety, she promised her husband to stay in regular contact. On July 14, 2016, Samia arrived in Pakistan and stayed at a close friend's house. She left her passport and return ticket to Dubai with her friend, expressing her fear and insecurity and asking her friend to pray for her safe return to Syed. The first few days were relatively calm. She kept Syed and friend informed about her activities. She visited her aunt's grave with family and met several relatives. Her return flight to Dubai was scheduled for July 21. However, on July 20, Samia abruptly stopped all communication. On July 20th, 2016, a heartbreaking incident occurred when Shahid contacted the police to report the death of his daughter, Samia. Upon arriving at the house where Samia had lived with Shakil, Police found her lifeless body at the bottom of the stairs. Sadly, it was too late to save her. They found bruises on her body, which her parents attributed to her falling down the stairs. A small amount of pink foam was flowing from her mouth. Shahid speculated that she might have had a heart condition, causing her to fall and tumble down the stairs. Since no one was home at the time, she did not receive immediate help and passed away. When questioned about Shakil, Shahid explained that he was away on business. The police found no evidence of foul play at the scene and opted not to open a criminal investigation. An autopsy conducted the same day revealed no signs of violence, concluding that her death was due to natural causes. Samia was buried just a few hours after her death. Her sudden departure was not considered suspicious and was not investigated by the authorities, but it had a devastating impact on Syed. When Syed learned of his wife's, Samia's, sudden death from a heart attack, he was in shock and disbelief. According to media reports, she chose to end her life due to depression because she could not have children. However, her family rejected this version. They claimed that she passed out, then fell down the stairs and broke her neck. The investigation revealed bitter truths. Syed quickly flew to Pakistan on the earliest available flight and went directly to the police station, alleging that Samia had been killed by her relatives and Shakil. He detailed the forced marriage she had endured, her subsequent escape, and the threats she had received from her family. This testimony completely changed the development of the case, forcing the authorities to determine this was a criminal act. However, by this time, Samia had already been buried, and the official report still stated she had died of natural causes. Determined to seek justice, Syed turned to European law enforcement and the media, as Samia was a British citizen, to push for further investigation. Samia's father, Shahid, initially agreed to an interview, attempting to depict Syed as a fraud and extortionist. However, when Syed presented their marriage certificate, a medical report, and post-mortem photos of Samia, authorities launched an investigation. The report revealed bruises on Samia's neck and legs, along with traces of male seminal fluid, suggesting she had been in an intimate encounter shortly before her death. But with whom, given that Shakil allegedly wasn't home that day? Syed held a press conference, presenting extensive evidence, including text, voice, and video messages from Samia, where she repeatedly expressed fear for her life. It is believed that the police may have taken bribes, leading to the immediate arrest of Shahid and Shakil. Investigations revealed that they never intended to let Samia's return to Dubai. They forced her to go to the house given to her as a wedding gift, where they searched for her passport and tickets, which she had given to a friend to keep. In a fit of rage, Shakil physically restrained her. When she tried to escape, they caught up with her on the stairs. Shakil strangled her with her scarf, while Shahid held her legs, ensuring she had no chance to survive. Shakil later confessed to this crime at the police station, although Shahid denied any involvement in the killing of his own daughter. In addition to Shahid and Shakil, Samia's uncle, who received a fake report before the autopsy, and the police chief in charge of the initial investigation have both been arrested. In court, Shakil retracted his confession, claiming it was made under coercion. He spent just over 2 years in prison before being released on bail in September 2018. In 2019, he remarried and again tried to move to the UK, but still without success. Samia's father, Shahid, was imprisoned from July to December 2016 and later released on bail. He died in January 2018 at the age of 52 due to deteriorating health. Before his death, he maintained his innocence and denied any involvement in his daughter's death. Samia's uncle and the commissioner were also released in the fall of 2016 without facing any penalties. Shortly afterwards, arrest warrants were issued in Pakistan for Samia's mother and younger sister, but they quickly returned to Bradford. Her younger sister, Mata, later gave a detailed interview, which accused her and Syed of being the cause of their family's breakdown, attempting to tarnish their reputations. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Victoria Nasirova. On September 2, 2016, police received a call from Olga Tsvik, 35, a Ukrainian immigrant who worked as a beautician, who reported that several valuables had gone missing from her bedroom. She explained to police that she had recently been to the hospital, where she experienced severe dizziness and nausea, with occasional loss of consciousness. Even after returning home, she continued to appear distracted. During the investigation, the police conducted a detailed interrogation of Olga. She recalled a recent troubling encounter with a client named Victoria Nasirova, who came to her home and insisted on urgent eyelash extensions. Victoria had been in contact with the salon before and often acted as if she and Olga were friends. However, on that day, Victoria asked to come to Olga's home to get eyelash extensions. Olga explained that she only worked at the salon and did not accept home customers, but Victoria deliberately ignored her explanation and insisted on urgent eyelash extensions, and Olga finally agreed. Olga later told the police that Victoria had tried to ask her out several times, but she had refused. Another notable detail was that Victoria looked very similar to Olga, which often made Olga feel uncomfortable. During the investigation, it was discovered that Victoria had shown up at Olga's apartment with 3 pieces of cheesecake from the best local bakery. Victoria ate 2 and insisted that Olga have a third, to which Olga eventually agreed. After a brief tea party with cheesecakes, Olga felt unwell. Once Victoria left, Olga became extremely nauseous and lost consciousness for about 30 minutes. When she woke up, she called 911 and was taken to the hospital by ambulance. However, the doctors found nothing wrong in her blood tests. Upon returning home, Olga discovered that some of her valuables were missing and reported the theft to the police. Police were initially skeptical of her story, suspecting that Olga may have been under the influence of drugs, which were causing her to hallucinate. Her unusual behavior and appearance contributed to their suspicions. Police concluded that her account of the incident, including her reference to a woman who resembled her, was likely fabricated. Olga firmly denied using drugs and presented her argument convincingly. She believed that her issues stemmed from a piece of cheesecake she had eaten, suggesting it might have been poisoned. The police quickly inspected the scene and discovered a box from a local bakery in the trash. Olga identified the box as the cheesecake Victoria had brought. The police collected it as evidence because it still had crumbs left inside. Analysis of the cheesecake could determine whether it was the cause of Olga's problems. The examination of the cheesecake revealed no abnormalities. Despite this, the Olga insisted that the dessert was the reason for her illness. She mentioned that she had visited the hospital, where doctors examined her but found nothing unusual. In response to inquiries about her condition and the tests conducted, police contacted the hospital. However, the doctors declined to share information due to privacy policies. The police interpreted this refusal as further evidence to doubt the Olga's claims. Additionally, they could not locate the client mentioned by Olga, leading to a postponement of the case until more information becomes available. A neighbor provided details after noticing a suspicious woman near Olga's apartment the following day. The woman appeared several times, lingering around Olga's apartment until she encountered the neighbor. The strange woman said that her friend Olga was sick and then left in a hurry. Concerned, the neighbor noticed that Olga's apartment door was open and decided to check on her. When she entered, the neighbor found the apartment uncomfortably hot, with the heating system on full blast despite the hot summer weather. Olga was alive but unconscious in bed, dressed strangely, in a revealing bra and sweatpants. The police felt that someone had deliberately changed her clothes. Scattered around her were powerful pills, suggesting that Olga may have taken them with the intention of ending her life. The neighbor quickly called 911, describing the strange woman as dark-haired, attractive, and very similar to Olga. After receiving new information, the police were convinced that the woman who resembled Olga was real and not a figment of Olga's imagination. Therefore, the police intensified their efforts to investigate the case. The police suspected that Victoria Nasirova, who was involved in a cheesecake in the previous case, was involved in this case. The police began searching for Victoria, but they had no clues or even any photos of her. However, a private investigator, who had been monitoring Victoria's activities for a long time, tracked Victoria down on the internet and contacted the police. He located Victoria, where she was advertising her escort services on a dating website and social media. The private investigator suspected that she used these platforms to find victims for her crimes. Her methods were effective. Victoria would meet her victims, drug them with psychotropic substances to render them unconscious, and then steal their valuables. Meanwhile, Olga eventually recovered from her traumatic experience. After leaving the hospital, she shared her story of poisoning on social media. Soon after, one of her clients mentioned a man named Ruben Barakov who had gone through a similar situation. Ruben owned a dry cleaning business and had met a woman named Victoria on a Russian dating site a few months before Olga suffered cheese poisoning. Victoria had invited Ruben to her home, bragging about her cooking skills. He accepted the invitation, but as soon as he tasted her food, he passed out. Victoria then rummaged through his pockets, taking an expensive watch, cash, and cards. Ruben was under the influence of a powerful psychoactive substance and truly believed that it had nearly killed him. Victoria then took him to a dry cleaner's. She explained to Ruben's colleagues that he was drunk, and she left. When Ruben regained consciousness, he realized that he had been robbed. The private investigator suspected the situation was much more serious, and that the two victims were lucky to be alive. In 2017, he worked with a client from Russia who asked him to help track down a dangerous criminal. Nadia Ford contacted the private investigator after her biological mother, Alla Alexienko, went missing. Nadia currently lives in New York, USA, but was born in Russia. Nadia, who is from Krasnodar, was raised by her mother, Alla, who worked hard to provide for her children. Nadia had dreamed of living in the United States since she was a child, and her dream came true when she came to study in America in 2007. While there, she met a man, married him, and took his last name, Ford. However, their marriage did not last, and they eventually divorced. Nadia chose to stay in the United States and successfully built her life there. She kept a close relationship with her mother, Alla, who was living alone at the time. Alla sold her house and then moved to a new apartment. In early 2013, after moving into a new apartment, Alla had a new neighbor named Victoria Nasirova. Despite the significant age difference, Victoria quickly became friends with Alla. Alla shared stories about her daughter's life in the United States, which sparked Victoria's interest in visiting America and meeting Nadia. Alla then arranged for them to meet. In September 2013, Victoria went to New York, where she met Nadia, and they became close friends. Nadia was a kind and pleasant woman. Victoria sought her advice on how to stay in the United States, and Nadia shared a few tips. However, Victoria's plans did not work out, and she eventually returned to Russia. Despite this, she maintained a close relationship with Alla. In the fall of 2014, Victoria planned another trip to the United States, and she told Alla that she could help send gifts to Nadia. Trusting Victoria, Alla happily agreed. Alla then brought $6,000 in cash and valuables, including 2 expensive mink coats, to send to Nadia. Victoria then repeatedly postponed her trip to the United States for various reasons, leaving Alla worried about whether she would actually go and what would happen to her gifts. Worried, Alla called her daughter Nadia to express her concerns. Nadia reassured her mother and suggested that she ask Victoria to return her belongings. On October 4, 2014, Alla called Nadia with the good news that she had finally spoken to Victoria, who agreed to return her valuables. However, this never happened, and Alla soon disappeared. Nadia kept calling her mother, but she didn't answer. This was unusual since they were in contact every day. Worried, Nadia contacted Victoria to ask about her mother. Victoria confirmed that she had seen Alla, and they had talked and had tea together. Victoria then left, never saw Alla again. Victoria mentioned that Alla was planning to go somewhere, but she didn't know where. Victoria also tried to contact Alla, and even visited Alla's apartment to check on her, but there was no sign of her mother being home. Alla was still unreachable. After a few days, Nadia and her brother received a number of unusual text messages from an unknown number, supposedly from their mother Alla. The messages stated that there was no need to look for her because she was happy. However, the way the messages were written was inconsistent with Alla's style, which raised their concerns. Nadia realized that something was definitely wrong and decided to book the next flight to Russia to assist in the investigation into her mother's disappearance. Upon arriving in Krasnodar, Nadia went to her mother's apartment, but it was stripped of valuables that Victoria was supposed to return. There was no trace of her mother. Concerned, Nadia quickly contacted the police and reported her mother's disappearance. She informed the police about her suspicions regarding Victoria, a neighbor of her mother who had become suspiciously close to her and failed to return Alla belongings. It soon became clear that Victoria had a motive to harm Alla. The police were interested in the information and devised a plan. Nadia called Victoria and pressed Victoria for information about her mother's whereabouts. Victoria, angered by Nadia's questions, shouted that her mother was still alive, but Victoria did not know where she was. The police, who had been listening in on the call, decided to approach Victoria. At her home, she successfully convinced the police that she was not involved and claimed that Nadia's accusations were baseless, with no evidence against her. Meanwhile, Nadia returned to her mother's apartment to investigate. She noticed that the place was surprisingly clean, with no dust, as if it had just been thoroughly cleaned, despite her mother's absence for several days. This raised questions for Nadia. Who could have cleaned the apartment? Additionally, she discovered that several valuable items, including jewelry and $50,000 in cash, were missing. Concerned, Nadia decided to report this to the police. The police, after speaking with Victoria, tried to persuade her that her mother had taken the money and jewelry on a trip and would be back soon. However, Nadia did not buy this explanation. She sensed that her mother was in danger and that it had something to do with Victoria. Nadia reached out to all her mother's friends and relatives, but no one knew where her mother was. In her desperation, Nadia printed flyers with her mother's photo and posted them all over the neighborhood. She also drove around the city, visiting her mother's favorite places, but her efforts were unproductive. Nadia contacted Victoria, begging her to return her mother and expressing her willingness to do anything, even offer a reward. However, Victoria denied any involvement. Despite this, Nadia remained hopeful that her mother was still alive and continued to search. She regularly went to the police for updates, but there was no information about her mother. Determined to find answers, Nadia hired a private investigator. After investigating, the private investigator discovered that Victoria had rented a car from a service center on the day Alla went missing. He checked the car's information and reviewed surveillance camera footage from October 5, 2014. The videos show a car driving on a highway outside the city. There were two people inside, Victoria, who was driving, and Alla Alexenko, motionless in the front passenger seat. She shared this information with the police, who confirmed that Victoria had rented the car and brought her in for questioning. Victoria admitted that she had driven the rental car that morning, October 5, but she denied that there was anyone else in the car with her. Victoria agreed to take a lie detector test. After completing the test, she was released, but the results later showed that she had failed, leading the police to consider her a prime suspect in the case. Before the police could arrest her, Victoria fled the country without notifying the police. They began searching for Victoria. Nadia remained in Russia for another 6 months to assist in the investigation, holding out hope that her mother was still alive. She also contacted Interpol for help in finding Victoria. Police traced the rental car to a dense forest in Armavir, which turned out to be Victoria's hometown. This is where the search for Alla began. Nadia's hopes of her mother's safe return were dashed in April 2015, when police informed her of the tragic news. Her charred remains were found in the same forest, about a 3-hour drive from where Alla went missing. Nadia was able to identify her mother through her dental records, as the rest of her body was badly burned and unrecognizable. The cause of death could not be determined. Following the identification, an arrest warrant was issued for Victoria Nasirova, and her case was referred to Interpol. After her mother's funeral in Krasnodar, Nadia returned to the United States. She found it difficult to cope with her mother's death and was unable to work for a long period. Eventually, she gathered her strength and made a promise to her mother that she would seek justice and ensure that those responsible for Alla's death would be punished. One day, Nadia discovered a photo of Victoria on social media. The wanted woman was showing off her lavish lifestyle in Mexico. After discovering this, Nadia contacted the U.S. police to report Victoria's whereabouts, and they began an investigation. At this point, Nadia hired one of the top private detectives in the United States to speed up the investigation. A wealthy friend of Nadia covered the cost of the detective's services, which she could not afford since she had not been working for several months while searching for her mother. The private detective thoroughly examined Victoria's social media photos and was able to confirm that she was already in the U.S. One of the selfies, taken while wearing sunglasses, showed a reflection of a car's dashboard. After examining hundreds, even thousands of cars, the private investigator determined it was a Chrysler 300. The private investigator was able to determine that the last photos were taken in Sheepshead Bay, a neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York. By checking a database of cars in that area, he was able to narrow down his search and identify a suspect. He discovered that Victoria was living with her boyfriend in an apartment complex just 5 blocks from Nadia, and that the Chrysler was registered to her new boyfriend. Victoria was probably unaware that the case had escalated to the point where Interpol had a global warrant for her arrest, which is why she felt safe posting her photos online. The private investigator located the boyfriend and contacted him. It was discovered that he had been poisoned by Victoria. She followed her usual methods of poisoning her boyfriend and even poisoned his beagle, which unfortunately died. Victoria's freedom poses a danger, as her potential victims could increase. The police searched Victoria's apartment and discovered Olga Tzvik's identity card. This discovery sheds light on why Olga was targeted by Victoria. Victoria needed money and valuables, but she also needed an ID that. With her temporary visa about to expire, she was looking to use someone else's ID to avoid returning to Russia, where she would have to stand trial. Police believe she intended to kill Olga, the real owner of the passport, to steal their identity. Fortunately, Olga survived thanks to the quick action of a neighbor. Additionally, the box containing the remains of the cheesecake was sent for analysis, marking a significant breakthrough in the investigation. The investigation returned to the lab, where researchers analyzed the cheesecake. It was determined that Victoria had used a sedative, but she had used a higher dose, which rendered her victims unconscious. Olga was lucky to survive after eating the cheesecake. The high temperature in her apartment was no accident. Heat amplifies the effects of the drug and can even be fatal. Victoria apparently knew this, so she increased the temperature in the house and tried to dress Olga in warmer clothes. But luckily, Olga was discovered by neighbors in time. After her arrest, Victoria denied all allegations against her, including the murder of Alla, who was Nadia's mother. She also rejected claims that she attempted to murder Olga Tzvik and other victims. Victoria had previously been a suspect in the theft of 2 fur items in May 2016, but that case did not progress. Additional incidents emerged involving her in thefts, where she would meet men online, visit their homes, drug them, and rob them. Most of the men chose not to report these crimes to the police due to concerns about publicity, allowing Victoria to evade consequences. The trial was delayed for a long time. The case finally went to court in January 2023, attracting considerable media and public attention. Victoria chose not to testify at the trial and remained silent. The court could not discuss the details of Allah's death because it happened in another country. Victoria's defense argued that there was no evidence that Victoria had poisoned the cheesecake and forced Olga to eat it. Victoria herself ate 2 pieces in front of Olga and had no problems. The prosecution then argued that Victoria had only added poison to 1 piece of cheesecake, specifically the 3rd piece she offered Olga. She ate the other 2 pieces without the poison. This misled Olga. After a lengthy deliberation, the jury found Victoria Nasirova guilty of 2nd-degree murder. Although the maximum sentence for the crime is 25 years, the judge shortened her sentence to 21 years. By law, she could apply for parole after serving 15 years. Victoria faced harsh prison life. She frequently complained about poor food and inadequate medical care. During her incarceration, she was attacked, leaving her scarred and nearly blind. After the attack, Victoria sued the prison, alleging that guards were negligent in failing to support her. The case ended in a $325,000 settlement. In a recent interview from prison, Victoria denied any wrongdoing, including Allah's murder. She claimed that she had nothing to do with poisoning beautician Olga with the cheesecake, explaining that she had eaten the cheesecake herself and had not become ill. Victoria said that she had only shared a piece of cheesecake with Olga and had not forced her to eat it. After completing her prison sentence in the United States, Victoria will be deported to Russia, where she will face trial for Allah's murder. Her daughter Nadia said she was relieved that Victoria was in prison and would not be able to escape justice. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Carrie Ann Jopek. Carrie Ann Jopek was born on August 17, 1968, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a large city with a population of over 500,000. Her parents, Carolyn and Robert, divorced when she was very young. Shortly after, her mother remarried a man named Frederick Toussaint. The family lived in downtown Milwaukee along with 2 daughters, the youngest of whom was named Maggie. Carrie grew up in a loving family and had a close relationship with Frederick, whom she considered her biological father. She did not know of her biological father's existence, as he did not communicate with her. Carrie was well educated and had everything she needed. She was friendly and kind, which helped her make many friends, including older teenagers. However, during her teenage years, Carrie's personality began to change, leading to conflicts with her mother and stepfather. When she discovered that Frederick was not her biological father, she became very angry with her parents. She often used this information against him in arguments. Some relatives described Carrie as stubborn, while others thought she was simply going through a challenging period in her life, especially since she was only 13 years old at the time. On March 15, 1982, Carrie was allowed by her parents to stay overnight at her friend Marcia's house. Since both girls were in 7th grade, they went to school together the next morning, March 16. However, because they were in different classes, they could only see each other at lunchtime. Carrie was upset because her teacher had reprimanded her for arguing with another student who had spilled paint on her. The teacher then contacted Carrie's parents to report Carrie's behavior and truancy. The teachers suggested that Carrie's mother pick her up after school to discuss her actions. However, Carrie's house was close enough to the school, so her mother allowed Carrie to walk home by herself. Carrie was upset. She knew her mother and stepfather would probably scold her, so she didn't want to go home. Her friend comforted her, and they parted ways after school. Although reluctant, Carrie had to go home because she lived only a few blocks from school. Normally, it would only take her 3 minutes to walk home, But that day, she never returned. It is important to note that the 1980s in America were generally a safe time. People trusted each other, and crime rates were low compared to today. Additionally, the incident occurred in a crowded area where everyone knew each other, so no one thought it was strange for a 13-year-old girl to walk home from school alone. Carrie did not come home. Carolyn waited for her at home and then went out to look for her. Carolyn thought that Carrie had stopped to visit a friend on the way home and would be back soon. It is important to note that they could not contact Carrie because cell phones had not yet been invented. As the night wore on, Carolyn grew increasingly concerned. She set out again to look for her daughter. First, she went to see Carrie's best friend, Robin, who lived across the street. Unfortunately, no one in Robin's house had seen or heard from Carrie since school ended. Next, Carolyn contacted Marsh, who had spent the night with Carrie. However, Marsh did not see Carrie after she left. Eager to help, Carrie's friends joined the search and began checking with neighbors and classmates who might have seen her after school, but no one had any information. By 11 p.m., a search party of local volunteers who knew the family was formed. Many neighbors, friends, and acquaintances took to the streets to patrol the area and ask questions. Unfortunately, they could not find any information about the Carrie. They decided to wait for Carrie until the next morning. On March 17, when the girl still had not returned home, Carolyn went to the police station to report her missing. By then, the Carrie had been missing for almost a day, prompting police to act quickly, as the situation could be serious. Initially, the primary theory was that Carrie had run away, as she was known to be a difficult teenager who sometimes skipped classes and often spent the night at friends' houses. Police thought that Carrie was simply spending time with friends. However, after interviewing all her friends, they realized this was not the case. None of them had seen Carrie after school, leading them to conclude that something must have happened to her on her way home. They then began questioning residents living along her route that day, but these inquiries yielded no useful information. None of the residents had seen Carrie or noticed anything unusual. The police discovered that Carrie had been upset with her family after learning that her stepfather was not her biological father. Police believed this revelation might have driven her to search for her biological father, whom she could have gone to see that day. By this time, a day had passed since Carrie left school, and there was still no news about her. The police located her biological father, Robert, who lived in a different area of Malak, hoping she might be with him. Unfortunately, when they contacted him, their hopes were dashed. Robert explained that he had been at work all day the previous day and had not seen Carrie. A thorough inspection was carried out at the house of the Carrie. Police searched through all her belongings for clues, but found nothing significant. Consequently, the search for the missing person continued. A day after her disappearance, there was still hope that the teenager was alive. However, the critical window for finding a missing person is 48 hours, after which the chances of a successful rescue decrease significantly. Therefore, the police needed to act quickly. During the investigation, the police focused on Johns, who lived just a few houses away from Carrie's family. John was 17 at the time and had developed a close relationship with Carrie. The police learned that he had a rebellious personality and a history of legal trouble, including convictions for petty theft and selling marijuana. Despite their 4-year age difference, John showed an interest in Carrie, which raised concerns. The police decided to investigate further and brought John in for questioning. John adamantly denied any involvement in Carrie's disappearance, claiming that he had not even seen her that day. The police were unable to gather any useful information during their questioning, and there was no solid evidence against John. As a result, he was released. The police then turned their attention to her stepfather, Frederick. In these cases, the perpetrator was often someone close to the victim, and cases involving stepfathers were not uncommon, which added to their interest in him. The police looked closely at her family, especially the relationship between Carrie and Frederick. They discovered that the two had recently been fighting, a change from their previous relationship. Frederick attributed the turmoil to Carrie's adolescence, believing that her hormones had made her more irritable and prone to anger over small matters. Despite this, he maintains that he would never harm her. An anonymous witness reported some details regarding her stepfather, Frederick. They mentioned that the day after Carrie went missing, Frederick poured a new concrete slab in the backyard. The witness suggested that this may have been Frederick's way of disposing of the body by burying it underneath the concrete slab. This information seems suspicious and should be investigated. The concrete slab was examined using ground-penetrating radar, and no suspicious voids were detected. When the area beneath the slab was excavated, it was found to be empty. The yard was well maintained, showing no signs of recent digging. The police decided to conduct a second round of questioning with the Carrie's friends, focusing on the possibility that she might have run away with a boyfriend. Although Carrie never mentioned having a boyfriend to her parents, the police speculated that she may have kept this relationship secret. However, her friends firmly denied this possibility, insisting that Carrie was not in a relationship with anyone. The police tried to collect evidence, but it is important to note that forensic science in the 1980s was not as advanced as it is today. At that time, there was no DNA testing, trackable cell phones, cameras, or GPS technology. This made finding evidence more difficult. As a result, the police could not find any clues. Carrie seemed to have disappeared without a trace. Lack of evidence then caused the case to stall. The police did not have a strong motive for Carrie's abduction, nor could they find a suspect. To raise public awareness of their daughter's disappearance, Carrie's parents turned to the media for help. They appealed to anyone with information about Carrie to come forward, but still, no leads came. The investigation was stalled due to lack of evidence. More than a year later, on September 2, 1983, a mysterious body was found in the John family home. The contractor was repairing the back porch. He leveled the ground and dug up a significant amount of dirt. While doing so, he noticed a foul odor coming from a pile of disturbed dirt. Upon inspection, he discovered human remains. The contractor immediately called the police. Everyone believed the remains to be those of Carrie. The body was then subjected to dental records analysis to determine the identity of the remains. All members of John's family were questioned. During his police interview, John denied any involvement and requested a lawyer. A year earlier, the police had lacked substantial evidence to charge or detain him, so they released him but continued to view him as a suspect. The remaining members of John's family have denied any involvement in the murder. The medical examiner investigated Carrie's cause of death and discovered severe injuries to her head and neck. She had significant internal bleeding, with lacerations on her left side. These injuries suggested that she had been attacked by someone else, leading to the case being classified as a homicide. Unfortunately, the autopsy was unable to provide enough information to determine whether rape had occurred. Carrie's body was found in her friend John's backyard, but this does not mean that he was responsible for her death or that he buried her there. Witnesses said that on the day she disappeared, there was a party at John's house. Police had to piece together the case from scratch, with few clues to follow. And so much time had passed since the party that it was difficult for those who were there to remember what happened. Several teenagers were interviewed about the party at John's house. Some claimed they were there but could not remember any details. Others said they had only heard about the party and were not actually there. John claimed he did not organize any events that day, and police found no evidence to contradict his statement. 4 days after Carrie's body was discovered, police received a new lead. A witness identified Jose Ferreira, a 16-year-old boy who lived next door to Carrie. He was seen in John's backyard when Carrie's body was discovered, which raised some suspicion. The police decided to pursue the lead and invited Jose to the police station for questioning. Jose denied any involvement in Carrie's death or disappearance. Jose knew her well and was friends with her, so he was very upset when he discovered her body in the backyard. He claimed that he did it to honor his old friend. Jose's story seemed credible. He was also questioned about a party at John's house on the day Carrie went missing, but he said it never happened. The police had no evidence against Jose, so they had to release him after questioning. Friends described Jose as friendly and cheerful, and no one believed he would hurt Carrie. They spent a lot of time together and were close friends. The investigation continued, but no leads were found. The case hit a dead end. It wasn't until 33 years after Carrie's murder that the investigation made any progress. On October 11, 2015, a man contacted a journalist to confess to the murder. His name was Jose Ferreira. In addition to contacting the journalist, he called the hotline and admitted to killing 13-year-old Carrie Ann Jopek years earlier. He also confessed to his wife about the crime. Journalists and switchboard operators were stunned by his confession and immediately notified the police. At the same time, Jose's wife learned of his crimes and went to the nearest police station to report him. Jose was 50 years old at the time. The police reviewed the case file. Despite Jose's confession, the police were in no hurry to arrest him. 2 days after his telephone confession, Jose turned himself into the police station and gave a detailed account of the events of 33 years ago. His sudden actions and confession were because he believed it would prevent his wife from getting a divorce. This statement puzzled the police. Jose said that on the day of the incident, Carrie returned home from school. She noticed a party going on at John's house. She wanted to avoid going home where she would face punishment, so she decided to join the party. At the party, she met Jose and they engaged in conversation. Then they went down to the basement together to find some wine. On the way down to the basement, he kissed her and she agreed. As they walked down the stairs to the basement, Carrie suddenly changed her mind and said she wanted to leave. In a fit of rage, he pushed her, causing her to lose her balance and fall down the stairs, resulting in a broken neck. In a moment of loss of control, he raped her, not knowing that she had died from the fall. His actions were classified as sexual assault and use of force. He defended himself by claiming that he had loved Carrie. He felt offended by her decision to leave, but he insisted that he did not want her to die. He panicked and dismissed the incident as an accident. Jose feared going to jail and ruining his life. He seized the opportunity during a lively party when no one noticed his presence in the basement. He needed to dispose of the body quickly to avoid being seen. Jose hid the body, and when night fell, he took a shovel and dragged Carrie into the backyard. In the dark, he quietly dug a hole and buried her. He believed that his plan had gone smoothly and that no one had seen him. However, the police were baffled by his story. They found it hard to believe that at such a crowded party, no one had noticed them together, and no one had noticed him digging the hole and burying Carrie. The police suspected that Jose might have had an accomplice, but he adamantly denied that anyone else was involved. Carrie's family said that Jose often visited them and was present at the farewell and burial. Carrie's mother remembered that Jose had mentioned being haunted by Carrie's ghost, which surprised them, but they ignored it at the time. While this could have been a warning sign, no one thought that the killer could be one of the friendly people in the neighborhood. Jose later revealed that Carrie's spirit had haunted him for years, making it impossible for him to live a normal life. This ultimately contributed to his decision to confess to the crime to ease his conscience. During the trial, the prosecutor asked for Jose to be convicted of second-degree murder. The defense argued that the case was manslaughter. Initially, bail was set at $200,000, but Jose then began to recant his confession. The prosecution's case relied heavily on Jose's confession. It would have been difficult to convince the jury of his guilt without any evidence. Ultimately, the prosecution offered a plea deal. In March 2017, Jose Ferreira agreed to plead guilty to sexually assaulting Carrie, which reduced his prison sentence to 7 years. The final sentence was handed down 35 years after Carrie was murdered. In 2022, Jose was released from prison and moved to the nearby town of Glendale, Wisconsin. He was listed in a police database as a potential sex offender and placed on supervision. Carrie's family expressed outrage that the man who murdered and raped a 13-year-old girl was released after only 7 years. He now lives a quiet life, as if nothing had happened, and as if he had not taken an innocent life. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Megan Emirowicz. A young girl's 18th birthday celebration turned into a nightmare. We'll find out in today's video. It took Conrad Emirowicz and Julia years to conceive. After unsuccessful attempts to conceive, they sought help at a specialist clinic. Medical professionals ran tests and determined that the couple would never be able to have biological children. The news devastated Conrad, 40, and his 31-year-old wife, Julia, who had always dreamed of a large family. However, they eventually accepted their situation. At that time, they had been married for over 2 years. In 2002, they adopted a baby girl named Megan. Just 3 days after her birth, she was taken away from her biological mother, who was struggling with addiction. Megan was placed in a more stable environment. A few months after adopting 2 children, Julia was surprised to discover that she was pregnant. They considered it a miracle and believed that the child was a blessing from God for their good deeds. Their third child, Morgan, was also their only biological child. Although only one of their 3 children was biological, they loved them all equally. With 3 young children, the couple experienced the challenges of caring for newborns, including the constant need to change diapers. This made them consider starting their own business, as they realized how expensive disposable diapers could be. They created soft cloth diapers. The diapers were highly absorbent, and while Julia made them at home, Conrad worked on marketing the product. Their diapers became quite popular. Conrad worked in information technology at a local IT company. 3 years later, Julia became pregnant again and gave birth to a baby girl named Anne. It turned out that the doctors had made a mistake, and they were able to have a baby after all. During this time, the family lived in Rowland Township, Michigan, a peaceful and cozy area, away from the hustle and bustle of big cities. Conrad began drinking heavily. This put a strain on their relationship, leading to frequent arguments. Finally, in 2011, Julia decided to file for divorce. After the divorce, the couple shared joint custody for the first few years, but the children lived primarily with their mother. When the older children, Austin and Megan, became teenagers, their parents suggested that they choose which parent they wanted to live with. Their mother was quite strict, while their father was more lenient and allowed them to attend parties and invite friends over. Additionally, his new home had more space, so Austin and Megan decided to live with him, thinking they would have more freedom. At first, everything seemed great. The teenagers felt like they were enjoying their newfound freedom. Conrad struggled with his alcoholism and never overcame it. Over time, he drank more heavily and neglected household chores such as cleaning and chores. As a result, the house and yard became increasingly messy. What had once been a comfortable place became an unsuitable environment for the children. Morgan and Anne, who lived with their mother, stopped visiting their father altogether because they were embarrassed to discuss him and did not want to bring friends over. Meanwhile, the eldest son, Austin, began to argue more frequently with Conrad. Austin was frustrated with his father's behavior, but felt powerless to change it. As his resentment grew, it turned into anger, and he even resorted to physical violence when confronting Conrad. One notable incident occurred at a friend's birthday party of Austin's. Conrad arrived drunk and disheveled, which Austin found embarrassing. On another occasion, Conrad attended Austin's graduation drunk and slurring his words. That night, Austin even noticed a foul odor coming from his father. Before he turned 18, Austin began looking for a job so he could move out. He saved enough money to live with friends, which helped him escape the toxic environment at home. As a result, he almost stopped communicating with the rest of his family. Meanwhile, Megan, who chose to live with her father Conrad, was left to do most of the household chores, including laundry, cooking, cleaning, and making sure her father stayed out of trouble. This pressure may have contributed to her developing behavioral problems, which friends and family eventually noticed. Megan began to harbor resentment toward her father, especially after he threatened a teacher with a knife, which led to her being expelled from school. As a result, her father arranged for her to be homeschooled. For reasons unknown, Megan also did not seek help from her mother and had no intention of moving in with her. One day, Conrad was too drunk to take Megan on a business trip, so she took his car without permission and drove away. Unfortunately, Megan got into an accident and crashed the car, but she suffered minimal legal consequences. Meanwhile, Conrad's alcoholism worsened. The family's difficulties left Megan shouldering all the household chores. She was overwhelmed by the myriad of problems, and chaos in the house continued to escalate. One day, Julia came to help clean. However, it took her about 10 hours to clean just one room. When she went down to the basement, she was overwhelmed by the smell of cat urine. She suggested to Megan that they move in together to escape the hardships of living with Conrad, an alcoholic father. But Megan refused. She chose to continue supporting her father, and by 2020, the situation became completely dire. Trash filled the yard, and the house was a mess. During this time, Megan was Conrad's only source of support. Since 2021, he had been experiencing health issues due to long-term alcohol abuse. He would occasionally lose consciousness and have trouble controlling his bladder. Megan stayed close to her father. She felt that she couldn't leave him because she feared he wouldn't survive without her. Despite his drinking, but Conrad was never aggressive. He was actually a nice guy. They would argue, but their conflicts were usually just minor verbal disagreements. In the fall of 2021, Megan is planning to celebrate her 18th birthday. Although her birthday is September 29, she decides to have the party on October 1 after school so all her friends can attend. Conrad agreed to pay for the hotel room for the event, even though he initially objected. On the morning of the holiday, her father, Conrad, was supposed to take her to the hairdresser. However, when Megan woke up, she found him asleep on the couch in the living room. Conrad was drunk and did not respond to her attempts to wake him. Frustrated, Megan yelled that he had disappointed her, to which her father responded with a yell, then rolled over and went back to sleep. Megan became extremely angry and started throwing objects at Conrad. Then she asked a friend to take her to the hair salon. She also took a tearful photo and posted it on social media to express her frustration with the situation. The next morning, Megan took out her dad's bank card, but it wouldn't work when she tried to make a payment. She assumed she had entered the wrong PIN. She tried calling Conrad, but he didn't answer. So she asked her friend Kayla, who lived nearby, to stop by her house and ask Conrad for the PIN. Kayla arrived around 4 p.m. When she walked into the house and greeted Conrad from a distance, she was shocked to see him up close. He was alive, but his body was covered in grotesque sores. His fingers looked burned, and his legs had a greenish tint. Despite his condition, Conrad provided her with the PIN code for his card. Kayla then called Megan to inform her of the situation. Kayla was surprised that Megan heard the situation and remained calm. Megan advised her to ignore her drunken father. Kayla then called Austin, who came to help, and asked Kayla to report what she saw to the police. She called 911 and waited in the driveway for the ambulance. Kayla spent 15 minutes talking to Megan, but Megan did not seem to understand the severity of the situation. The ambulance arrived very quickly, and they took Conrad out of the house. At that moment, Austin arrived with his friend Lucas. Austin asked his father what happened, and his father assured him that everything was fine. When the two young men entered the house, they discovered blood and a white powder on the sofa where their father was lying. Nearby, there was an open bottle of chemicals. It appeared that the powder on their father's body came from this bottle of chemicals. Conrad recalled that his injuries may have been related to Megan throwing several objects at him before she left. However, Megan was not concerned about her father's health. She continued to call Conrad several times, trying to get his PIN, but received no response. Although she had paid for his beauty services, Her frustration increased when she still could not reach him. Megan did not understand that her father was facing serious health problems and had been hospitalized. When her friend informed her of this, she misunderstood the situation and thought he was simply drunk. By this point, doctors had assessed Conrad's condition and discovered he had suffered severe chemical burns. Unfortunately, the hospital did not have the equipment necessary to treat such serious injuries, so they considered transferring him to a better-equipped facility. Austin called his mother and asked her to check Conrad's house again, as he needed to stay in the hospital. When Julia arrived, she was once again shocked by the state of the house while searching for a cell phone. During this time, the doctors ran some tests. They found that his blood alcohol level was very high. Despite being in the hospital for a long time, Conrad was still very drunk. It is difficult to imagine what his blood alcohol level was the morning he spoke to Megan. He explained the situation, but did not remember anything and gave inconsistent statements. Before Conrad was taken to the new hospital, 3 police officers spoke with him. They gathered all the information they had, including the suspicion that Megan had used a white powder to intentionally harm her father. While one officer stayed behind to talk to Conrad, the other officers went to look for Megan. Julie informed the officers of the location where Megan was supposed to be celebrating her birthday, and several officers went there. Around 12:15, police spotted a car with several teenagers inside, including Megan. They took her out of the car to ask her some questions about the incident. During questioning, Megan hesitantly confessed that she may have thrown some chemicals at her father. She suggested that she may have accidentally thrown water, which then caused a chemical reaction. As a result, the police had to arrest her and take her to the police station. Conrad allowed police to search his home, where they discovered a bottle of white powder, a highly alkaline product used to clear particularly stubborn blockages. Megan was charged with assault with intent to cause serious bodily injury and 1 count of domestic violence. She was released on $75,000 bail, but she was unable to pay it and remains in jail. Meanwhile, Conrad is in pain in the hospital, and surgeons consider his condition to be serious. They need to treat multiple wounds and remove dead tissue to make way for new skin. Conrad underwent multiple surgeries and suffered from several infections. He also had difficulty speaking, which required a tracheotomy. This was due to his long-term exposure to chemical fumes, which damaged his lungs. He also required dialysis, and his condition continued to deteriorate rapidly. As a result, doctors decided that amputation was necessary. At this point, the Conrad had been suffering for over 5 months, and doctors still couldn't find an effective treatment. Conrad's mental state worsened, and he often requested to be taken off life support to alleviate his pain. More than anything, he wanted to go home. He was eventually discharged and allowed to return home, where some relatives visited him. Unfortunately, just 3 days after coming home, he died due to complications, which occurred on March 6, 2022. Forensic experts determined that his death was caused by poisoning from chemical reagents that harmed his lungs and kidneys. As a result, the charges against Megan were upgraded to murder. She was also charged with the negligent handling of hazardous chemicals that led to his death. The Megan spent nearly 15 months in prison before her trial started. The first hearing took place on June 12, 2023. During the trial, relatives and friends of the Conrad shared their testimonies. Their accounts were similar, which reinforced the credibility of the events being reconstructed. They expressed their belief that Megan did not intentionally kill her father. They emphasized that Megan loved her alcoholic father, Conrad, and took care of him. However, that day, in a fit of anger that he might ruin her birthday, she threw things at him without realizing exactly what she was throwing or the potential consequences of her actions. The prosecution has a different view of the situation. They believe that Megan intentionally collected the chemicals with the intention of harming her father. They argue that this was premeditated rather than impulsive. The prosecution questioned how the Megan could have randomly found the chemicals and water that led to such a reaction. The prosecution believes that Megan poured out the reagents and then added water, which caused the chemical reaction. Megan's defense attorneys countered the allegations. They argued that Conrad was on the wet couch due to a urinary problem and that Megan did not need to throw water at him. They suggested that she may not have even done that, as she seemed uncertain when speaking to the police. They also argued that the chemical could have been thrown accidentally, and that Conrad's burns could have been caused by lying on the wet couch. A major problem arose during the trial. When the police initially found a bottle of chemicals, they did not collect fingerprints from the bottle as evidence. This mistake left a significant gap in the evidence, making it difficult for the prosecutor's office to prove exactly what Megan threw at Conrad. It is possible that the chemical was there by accident and not due to any wrongdoing on her part. Additionally, the burns on the Conrad's skin suggested that the alkali was actually rubbed into it. If Megan had done this, she would have been injured as well, but there were no gloves or protective equipment found in the house, and her hands showed no signs of burns. Alkali practically does not react with cold water at room temperature. It takes a long time for it to begin to damage the skin, and only with hot water does it react almost immediately. According to the lawyers, everything indicates that the Megan must have deliberately poured hot water into the bottle and thrown it at her father. However, all the circumstances of the case indicate the opposite, which means that she did not harm her father. After Megan left, there was serious consideration that someone else might have caused Conrad severe injuries. Suspicion fell particularly on Austin due to his odd behavior on the day of the incident and his strained relationship with his father and other family members. On July 15, 2023, a jury found Megan Emirowicz guilty, but the final decision rested with the judge, who scheduled a verdict hearing in 10 days. The verdict was controversial. Some believe that Megan intentionally killed her father, while others believe it was a coincidence. Megan herself claimed that she had no idea that mixing certain chemicals with water could lead to someone's death. On July 25, 2023, during a heartfelt speech in her defense, Megan apologized, expressed her longing for her father, and insisted that she never intended to hurt him. Megan admitted that she was unclear about what she had thrown at him. She requested the judge's understanding and support to help her pursue her dreams, which include earning a degree in marine biology and developing programs to assist children with depression, aiming to make a positive impact in the world. The Megan asserted that she does not pose a threat to society. The judge decided to give 15-year-old Megan another chance by sentencing her to just 1 year in prison and 5 years of probation. Megan and her lawyers were pleasantly surprised by this lenient sentence. Her mother and sisters supported her, believing she would start serving her sentence right away. However, she was released because she had already spent more time in jail than her sentence required. The prosecutor's office was unhappy with the verdict and requested that Megan be placed under house arrest, but the court denied this request, allowing her to move freely without any GPS monitoring. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Jorge Torres. Is there anything more horrific than a father murdering his own child? In the investigation and trial of crimes, mistakes in identifying the culprit can have dire consequences. One of the most heartbreaking situations is when an innocent person is wrongfully punished while the real culprit continues to be at large. This was on Mother's Day, when 8-year-old Laura Hobbs and her best friend, 9-year-old Crystal Tobias, decided to go for a short bike ride. They were expected to return within an hour, but vanished without a trace. Family members spent nearly the entire night looking for them. In the early morning, Laura's father, Jerry Hobbs, found her bike while climbing the hill, but Laura was still missing. The search for she and her friend continued. A couple of hours later, a few hundred meters from the bike, Jerry discovers suspicious figures lying motionless on the ground in the dim light of early morning. He quickly realized something was wrong. When they reached the scene, he discovered the bodies of Laura and her best friend Crystal, who had multiple stab wounds. It was clear that their deaths were brutal and prolonged. Sadly, this tragedy happened close to their home. Both girls lived in the small town of Xene, Illinois, which has a population of 20,000. Their deaths deeply affected the local community, sparking a desire among residents to uncover the truth and the cruel criminal responsible. However, it's difficult to uncover the full story. The police came under intense public pressure, so they worked hard to gather any information that could help them inform the community and capture the perpetrator. A few days after the tragedy, the commander of the task force at the Lake County Major Crimes Department confirmed that has a suspect. Detectives had already spoken with Jerry. They think he is involved in the case. He was brought in for questioning on the day the bodies were discovered. The police noted that Jerry had been acting strangely. A background check revealed that he had been released from a Texas prison just a month prior. Overall, he had a significant history of legal troubles. Although Jerry had repaired his relationship with his daughter, could he handle the situation involving her and her friend? The girls were discovered lying next to each other, having been raped. The scene was horrific. Both had suffered multiple stab wounds and had been beaten. A forensic expert identified a total of 31 cuts from a blade, primarily on the upper body, chest, and neck. The injuries were similar for both girls. Laura had defensive wounds, suggesting she fought back in desperation. There was reason to believe that the killer intentionally caused maximum pain to his victims, targeting areas that would prolong suffering rather than lead to immediate death. Jerry firmly denied any wrongdoing. Consequently, he was questioned for hours by law enforcement officers who sought to piece together the events leading to the deaths of the two victims. After a lengthy interrogation, the detectives managed to obtain a confession, which was captured on video. Jerry said he and his wife Sheila returned home on Sunday around 3 o'clock. At that time, their 4 children were flying kites by the lake. Their daughter Laura asked her parents if she could go for a bike ride with a friend, mentioning that it was Mother's Day and she wanted to celebrate it with a festive ride. Even though Laura was still under house arrest for taking $40 from Jerry, Sheila chose to let her go. Jerry disagreed with Sheila, believing that Laura should complete her punishment to understand her mistake. However, Sheila convinced him, and Jerry decided not to interfere, he wanting to ensure that both Laura and Sheila had a nice Mother's Day. Laura was allowed to go for a walk and was expected to return in an hour. However, she did not come back on time. Initially, her parents thought she and her friends had lost track of time while enjoying themselves and would return soon. But as evening approached and Laura still hadn't arrived home, their concern grew. The path through the park was short, and it usually took about 20 minutes to walk. Given that she had been gone for several hours, her absence became increasingly worrying. Jerry decided to investigate. He planned to search for his daughter along the path and intended to discipline her for disobeying, so he set off down a dirt road. Jerry encountered Laura and Crystal, who were playing and ignoring their parents' requests. Upset, Jerry insisted it was time for his daughter to go home and said he would punish her. He wanted to take Laura home and told Crystal to go back as well since her parents were waiting for her. However, neither girl was willing to leave on their own. Jerry then turned to Laura and said they were leaving because she was too caught up in her play. Laura reacted by getting upset, and Jerry grabbed her hand. She resisted and screamed to be let go. Crystal also pleaded with him to release her friend and leave them alone. Both girls started to be disrespectful and rude to Jerry. When Jerry refused to let go of Laura's hand, Crystal pulled out a small switchblade and insisted that he release her. In a moment of confusion, Laura bit her father's hand, which made him angry. He struck her in the face, causing her to fall to the ground. Crystal then lunged at him, but he easily took the knife away from her. Once he had control, he hit Crystal in the face, and she also fell. Furious, Crystal stood up and attacked Jerry, but he responded by stabbing her in the chest several times. Afterward, he approached Laura, who was desperately trying to defend herself, but she was no match for him. He struck her in the face again, and then stabbed her multiple times with the knife. Jerry's statements were collected after 24 hours of interrogation. The police believed they had caught the real criminal. He detailed the brutal aspects of the attack, information only the perpetrator would know. Despite his confession, it was hard to accept that a father could harm his own daughter and her friend so viciously. The detectives were particularly suspicious due to Jerry's criminal history. Born in 1970, Jerry Hobbs dropped out of school after 8th grade. He was known for his hot temper, which often led him into trouble. His criminal career began soon after school, with significant offenses occurring in 1990, when he first served several months in a Texas state prison. After that point, he was released but then re-imprisoned, typically for petty offenses. The list of criminal activities included possession of illegal substances and multiple assaults on individuals for theft. There were serious underlying issues that contributed to these crimes. In August 2001, Jerry attacked his wife while they were living in a trailer. The situation escalated into physical violence. 3 neighbors attempted to intervene, but Jerry, in a fit of rage, grabbed a chainsaw and chased them around the trailer park. He only stopped when one of the men struck him in the back with a shovel, causing him to fall and become incapacitated. By that time, the police had been called, and they arrived shortly after to take control of the situation. In December 2002, he was convicted and received a suspended sentence. However, he failed to report to his probation officer, leading to the revocation of his probation. In October 2003, he was sent to prison, where he served 18 months. He was finally released in April 2005. After his release, he took a bus to Zane. He visited Sheila's parents' house, where he reunited with Sheila and their 4 children. Laura and her 2 brothers were from Jerry's relationship with Sheila, while her eldest child was from her previous marriage. Jerry put aside past grievances and hoped to rebuild their relationship and live together as a family again. Jerry spent a lot of time reflecting over the past year and a half, dreaming of starting a new life. Despite the challenges in their relationship, Sheila genuinely loved Jerry, and they decided to give their relationship another chance. Unfortunately, their efforts were in vain. Just a month after they reunited, a tragic incident occurred. One day began positively, with children riding bicycles and roller skates along the forest path. Many families were having barbecues, making the area lively and seemingly safe. There had never been any incidents in the past, and parents often allowed their children to explore on their own. It was puzzling that no one seemed to have heard anything. There were no witnesses to the double murder. After Jerry confessed, the police arrested him, and he was held in custody without bail for over 2 years while the prosecution prepared for trial. During the investigation, several strange inconsistencies came to light. Investigative agency found it hard to believe that the 8- and 9-year-old girls had a knife and attacked him, prompting him to fight back and ultimately kill them in a moment of anger. Additionally, it was odd that the girls refused to go home after their father found them walking alone in the dark. Were the schoolgirls really not afraid to be outside at that hour? All of this seemed absurd. In his confession, Jerry did not mention anything about rape, even though the girls had experienced sexual violence at the crime scene. Forensic evidence later uncovered more details about the terrible events that occurred that day. Scientists found male DNA samples, but these did not match Jerry. Instead, they belonged to an unidentified man. Despite this evidence, investigators proposed their own explanation. However, They did not explain how male DNA could be found on the girls, making their reasoning seem even more questionable. The charges indicate that it was a serious case. They had Jerry's confession and his criminal background, so winning in court seemed like a formality. Details about the DNA evidence were not revealed. The video recordings of the interrogations were sufficient to persuade the jury. As a result, Laura's father was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In 2009, a significant change occurred in Arlington, Virginia. Amanda Snell, a 20-year-old servicewoman, lived there. On July 13, 2009, she failed to report for her shift at Fort Myer, raising concerns among her supervisors. Amanda was typically responsible and committed to her career, so not showing up for duty without notice was out of character for her. To check on her well-being, management sent several colleagues to her dormitory. They knocked on her door, rang the doorbell, and attempted to reach her by phone, but received no response. When they found her door unlocked, they entered the room. The first alarming sign was that her wallet and ID were untouched. The military quickly discovered blood and signs of a robbery in the bedroom. Amanda's body was found in the closet. She had been severely beaten, and a cord from a household appliance was still tied around her neck, with a pillowcase over her head. Investigators determined that she had died about 2 days before her body was discovered. Numerous pieces of evidence were collected from the crime scene, including a sample of the pillowcase. The police noted that her laptop, phone, and bed sheets were missing, and they found several footprints in the room, suggesting that another person had been present. Since the base was secured against outsiders, this indicated that the perpetrator likely lived or worked there. Forensic experts identified the shoe prints as Nike Air Force One, which were very popular on the base at the time, providing no leads for the police in their search for the suspect. Months went by. On February 27, 2010, another attack occurred just 5 kilometers from Amanda's workplace in Arlington. In the early hours of the morning, 2 female postgraduate students were returning from dinner when a man confronted them at the entrance of their building. He threatened them with a weapon, forced them inside, and followed them with his gun drawn. He bound their hands with electrical cords and ordered one of them to get into his car. He then drove her to a remote area outside the city, where he raped her. The attacker strangled her until she lost consciousness and left her to die in a wooded area covered in snow, not considering that she might survive the assault. The girl regained her senses and made her way to the nearest road, where a motorist found her and offered help. He stopped and called emergency services. The student, suffering from hypothermia, was taken to the hospital. Meanwhile, her friend had also contacted the authorities. Fortunately, they did not find any immediate danger. After being discharged, she spoke with the police and provided valuable information to the investigators. The most significant breakthrough was her detailed description of the attacker and his car. She described him as a short, smooth-skinned Hispanic man who drove a silver car. Detectives quickly recognized that the handwriting matched that of the criminal who attacked Amanda. Additionally, the police had obtained DNA from the person who attempted to take the girl's life. That her miraculous rescue would set off a series of events that would significantly impact many lives. Later that evening, officers collected a DNA sample from Amanda's. In the car described by the girl, they discovered the university ID of the kidnapped girl along with her earring, which helped establish a connection between the main suspect and the attack. The main suspect has since been taken into custody while awaiting trial. Several months went by as the police worked to understand the details of these disturbing events. Eventually, the DNA sample was analyzed and matched with the National Criminal Database. Law enforcement officials were taken aback by an unexpected discovery. The DNA found on the bodies of Laura and Crystal, who were murdered in 2005 in Zane, matched that of this suspect. At the time of the girls' murders, the suspect, Jorge Torres, was just 16 years old and lived in Zane. The police were further shocked to find out that he was a friend of Crystal's older brother. This investigation into the brutal attack revealed a shocking miscarriage of justice. Jerry, the father of Laura, was wrongfully imprisoned for a crime he did not commit. After spending many years in prison, Jerry began to show significant changes in his behavior. 2 weeks after DNA evidence linked Jorge to the crime, police identified the true killer of the 2 schoolgirls. The charges against Jerry were dropped, and he was released from prison in early August 2010. After the murders of the schoolgirls, Jorge was not apprehended and graduated from high school in 2006. Just a few months later, he enlisted in the Marines. The investigation revealed then he had boasted about being part of the Marines, an important unit of the U.S. Armed Forces. But this did not help his criminal image. He remained a ruthless monster and continued his violent actions. Now, it was necessary to examine his potential involvement in other attacks. When in prison, Jorge was still scheming and manipulating events. But the manipulative tactics Jorge used could no longer be hidden. Alongside the DNA testing, additional evidence was necessary to prove his involvement in the murder of the schoolgirls. To gather this evidence, authorities decided to recruit informants from among the prisoners in exchange for reduced sentences. A suitable informant was chosen. He was a former restaurant owner convicted of financial crimes and had no prior violent crime record. He willingly agreed to cooperate with the police. During a week in August 2010, he was approached to communicate with Jorge. This person said, in his confession, Jorge stated that he entered Amanda's apartment in the early morning with the intention of robbing and assaulting her. When Amanda woke up and saw him, he took advantage of her shock, tying her hands with a wire and wrapping a cord around her neck because he feared she would recognize him and report him to the police. Jorge claimed that she had no time to fight back. He coldly detailed how he assaulted Amanda while she was suffering, and then concealed her body in a closet to delay its discovery. The informant reported that Jorge spoke about his actions with a sense of pride, almost bragging, make law enforcement officers were shocked. Jorge's behavior indicated possible psychopathic traits, as individuals with such disorders often seek admiration. Following this confession, the police chose to reopen Amanda's case. They discovered that Jorge was a colleague of Amanda and lived directly across the hall from her. In his room, officers found a gun and a computer containing numerous graphic videos of the rape and torture of women. Additionally, Jorge was wearing Nike Air Force One sneakers that matched the shoe prints at the scene of Amanda's murder. Forensic scientists started re-examining samples from the pillowcase found on Amanda's head and from the bedsheet. DNA testing eventually revealed a match, adding one more victim to the list of crimes linked to this dangerous criminal. Although detectives believed he might be involved in other similar offenses, they found no evidence to support this. The police were left with a serious threat to society who had been free for years. It was finally time to pursue justice. The trial of the case in which the graduate student victim survived the attack began in December 2010. The defendant was found guilty of several charges, including kidnapping, rape, and attempted first-degree murder, and was sentenced to life in prison. This was just the beginning of multiple trials. The trial for the murder of Amanda Snell began in 2014, after prosecutors presented Jorge's recorded confession and DNA evidence. The jury unanimously supported the prosecution. In late May of that year, the judge sentenced Jorge to death. In mid-November, he was extradited to Lake County, Illinois, to face trial for the murders of Laura and Crystal. Although the attacker had already been sentenced to death, the state attorney believed it was essential to conduct hearings to honor the victims and their families. The trial started in mid-September 2018. Jorge opted for a plea deal, giving up his right to a trial and admitting to the intentional murders of 2 schoolgirls. He received a 50-year prison sentence for each murder, but his life sentence was already revoked. He returned to a Virginia prison to await the death penalty while his appeals were under review. The death penalty was abolished in the state in 2021, so Jorge is now serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. One key question remains: why would the biological father of one of the murdered schoolgirls take the blame for this terrible crime? In 2005, Jerry briefly explained his reasoning to his mother, stating that he had been broken by the police during interrogation. Later, after his release, he shared more details with journalists. He revealed that he had not slept for over a day and was actively searching for his daughter with Crystal's father when he learned of her death. Overwhelmed by shock, he was confused and in pain, and the police exploited this vulnerability during the lengthy interrogation to extract his shocking confession. Human rights activists claimed that Jerry faced constant pressure from law enforcement, who used various tactics to force him into a confession. As a result of their actions, Jerry lost 5 years of his life in prison. After these events, the man decided to seek compensation for moral damages because he now knows that the police deliberately ignored the most valuable evidence that confirmed his innocence and locked him up instead of looking for the real killer. DNA samples obtained after the rape clearly showed that Jerry was not involved in the crime. Yet law enforcement chose not to pursue the real culprit and continued to charge him. Now, it took multiple crimes being committed for the truth to finally come to light and for an innocent man to be set free. During the recent press conference regarding this incident, the state attorney addressed the media. He made efforts to downplay the situation and stressed that no one obstructed the detainees' access to legal counsel. He claimed that the detainees' rights were fully respected during questioning. According to him, Jerry's own behavior raised suspicions, and his past criminal record further damaged his credibility, leading the police to suspect his involvement in the girls' deaths. Detectives believed he had knowledge relevant to the case and continued to press him for answers. But Jerry maintained that this was merely an unfortunate coincidence. A few hours into the interrogation, the police took away Jerry's clothes, claiming they needed to analyze them. Instead, they gave him a thin suit that left him cold. They repeatedly showed him disturbing photographs from the murder scene and intimidated him with threats. Although Jerry consistently refused to confess, the police began threatening to arrest Sheila, suggesting that their children would be left without parents. He couldn't let that happen. To obtain a confession that could be used in court, they needed to record it on video. There was supposed to be no coercion or aggression from the officers, but many takes were necessary because Jerry initially refused to read the confession prepared by the investigator. Ultimately, the threats led him to comply with the detectives' demands. In February 2014, the civil lawsuit of a wrongfully convicted man was resolved, resulting in an award of over $6 million. However, he does not view this as a true victory. He emphasizes the importance of the wrongful conviction, which led to reforms in Lake County's law enforcement system. He notes that while he was imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit, the actual killer continued to rape and murder other victims. Fortunately, that killer is now in prison and can no longer harm anyone. Police believe he is a serial killer, and it's likely that there were additional victims. An investigation into other cases of forced confessions revealed that 4 more innocent men were also wrongfully convicted. DNA evidence cleared them, but this crucial information was ignored by the Lake County prosecutor at the time. These 4 men spent a total of 75 years in prison and are now free. The case of Jorge Torres serves as a stark reminder of the devastating impact of violent crime and the long road to justice for victims and their families. Jorge's crimes, which include the brutal murders of Laura Hobbs and Crystal Tobias in 2005, as well as the subsequent murder of Amanda Snell in 2009, went unsolved for years. leaving a trail of pain and confusion in their wake. His eventual conviction, made possible by DNA evidence, not only exonerated Jerry Hobbs, who was wrongfully imprisoned for the murders of the two young girls, but also revealed the extent of Jorge's crimes. The case underscores the vital role that forensic science plays in ensuring justice and preventing wrongful convictions, and serves as a stark reminder of the necessity of thorough investigations in the pursuit of the truth. Thanks to the persistence of law enforcement and the power of DNA testing, justice was finally served, although the damage done to the lives and spirits of those affected remains irreparable. Hello, crime enthusiasts! Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Benno Neumayer. In today's story, we focus on the Neumayer family, who live in Balna, a city in northern Italy. The family consists of parents Peter Neumayer and Laura Perselli. Their son Benno is 30 years old, and their daughter Maid is 27 years old. Benno is a doctor who has completed his university education and is dedicated to fitness. His father, Peter, is 63 years old, and his mother, Laura, is 68 years old, both retired from teaching at school. Despite their age, they are still active in social and cultural activities. The family is respected in the community. On January 4, 2021, Laura and Peter suddenly disappeared. They were last seen that morning when they went to the supermarket. Laura was planning to visit her mother, who had just returned home from the hospital. Laura rode her bike to her mother's house. A few hours later, Laura's sister sent her a short video of their sick mother, but Laura never opened the message. At the same time, Laura's daughter Maid was on vacation with a friend outside the city and sent her mother a photo but received no response. Benno called his mother at 8:30 that evening, but she did not answer. 3 minutes later, he sent a voice message to his girlfriend, Martina, expressing his concern that he had not been able to reach his parents. He told her that he would be at her house in about an hour or two for dinner as planned, and that he would be late. Benno asked her to call him back later on a regular phone line instead of WhatsApp because he did not have an internet connection. Martina called him back shortly afterwards, and they arranged to meet at 10:12 p.m. When Benno arrived at her house in his father's car, he said he had forgotten to shower. He went to wash his face and asked Martina if she could do his laundry. She didn't ask any questions and agreed to help. Benno gave Martina a bag full of dirty clothes. She didn't check the contents and threw them in the washing machine. The couple then had a great evening at the bar and a passionate night at her house. Benno didn't leave his girlfriend's house until 5:30 a.m. When he was with her at around 11 p.m., he sent his mother a short text message wishing her a good night. He noticed that she hadn't read it, but he was too busy that evening to think about it. Early in the morning of January 5, Laura's sister came to her house. She knocked on the door and rang the bell, but there was no response. It was clear that no one was home. Laura's sister was worried and called Benno to ask about Laura and Peter. However, Benno said he was not home and did not know where they were. Laura's sister was busy taking care of her sick mother and could not leave her alone, so she asked Benno to try to find them. Benno promised to help and suggested that their parents might have gone to the mountains, as they often did. He advised them to wait a few days. Meanwhile, Laura's daughter, Maid, was at the resort with her friend and boyfriend. She noticed that her messages had been ignored, which made her suspicious. She called her dad and was surprised when he didn't answer. His social media pages also showed unread messages, and she couldn't reach her parents, which made her even more worried. So Maid called her brother Benno, who said he was walking his dog in the mountains a few kilometers away from their parents' house, and he couldn't check on them. He seemed worried throughout the call, and his story sounded strange. The dog was very old and sick, barely moving even in their yard, so it was hard to believe he could hike several kilometers into the mountains with the dog. Unable to get more information from Benno, Maid decided to ask a neighbor who lived next door to her parents for help around 1:30 p.m. The neighbor was home, so she agreed to check on her parents. The neighbor knocked on the door, and Benno opened it. At that time, the neighbor was still on the phone with Maid. She immediately recognized her brother's voice and was surprised that he had just refused her request to check on her parents. Benno explained that he had rushed back to his parents' house after walking the dog and was now home. Benno said that their parents were not home and insisted that he did not know where they had gone. Maid called all the hospitals in the city because she had a strong feeling that something was wrong with her parents. Eventually, Maid stopped her outing and returned home. She asked Benno if he knew what had happened to their parents, but he said he did not know. He explained that he had spent the previous day with his girlfriend and had only returned home in the morning when their parents were no longer there. Feeling desperate, Maid decided to contact the police to report her parents missing. At this point, Benno began to discourage her from calling the police. He seemed to be stalling for time, but he suggested another approach that he thought would be more effective. So he contacted a friend who was a police officer for advice on how to handle the situation. Benno's friend suggested contacting a search and rescue service that specialized in mountain rescue, but that didn't help either. In the end, May decided to go to the police himself, regardless of whether Benno supported her decision or not. He eventually agreed, and they went to the police station together. The young man told them about his parents' disappearance and suggested that they might have gone into the mountains. He mentioned that an avalanche had occurred in the area they frequented, about a day after they left. He believed that his mother and father might have been buried under the snow. This explanation seemed plausible to the police and became the main focus of the investigation. Laura and Peter were declared missing, and search teams were deployed to the site of the avalanche. Trained dogs were used to search. Despite a thorough search, it took a long time to cover the entire area. The police decided to interview Benno to gather more information. They noticed that he was evasive and increasingly uncomfortable when asked difficult questions, making his behavior seem suspicious. After leaving the office, Benno suddenly displayed a sudden and inexplicable aggression. He attributed this outburst to hunger, fatigue, and stress. The next day, there was still no news from the police about Peter and Laura, prompting Maid to return to the station. Benno tried to stop her again, insisting that the police needed more time to conduct the search. During this time, another girl named Jasmine contacted Benno. It turned out he was chatting with 3 other people on Tinder, and he was particularly interested in Jasmine, and he showed little interest in the ongoing investigation. On January 6, Maid returned to the police station. It had been 2 days since her parents had gone missing. Laura and Peter had not contacted her, which made her believe that something had happened to her parents. They usually informed her before they went into the mountains and would prepare carefully for such trips. She felt the need to conduct a more thorough search of the area near their home. The police were actively involved from the beginning. Initially, they focused on the possibility that the couple had gone missing in the mountains. During this time, Benno went to the supermarket with his new girlfriend, Jasmine, where he bought a large amount of hydrogen peroxide, explaining that he needed it to prepare to sell his father's car. Search teams along with volunteers were organized to search the areas outside the mountains and around Laura. Despite the large resources and the participation of about 600 people in the search effort, Peter and Laura were still missing. Everyone worked together in the hope of finding them quickly. Finally, Maid expressed her concerns. She thought about Benno's strange behavior and the fact that their parents had disappeared shortly after she left the city for a short time. During that time, Benno was supposed to be with them, and their relationship was complicated. She suspected that he might know more than he was letting on. The police decided to question Benno again. This time, during questioning, he was overly friendly, which was surprising given his violent reaction after his previous encounter with the police. The officers suspected that he was deliberately controlling his demeanor to avoid revealing any important information. During this time, suspicions grew that Peter and Laura were likely dead, and it was believed that the couple's son, Benno, might be involved. Benno became the prime suspect. Maid regularly contacted the police, sharing information about Benno and their parents. Benno's behavior was often so rude and aggressive that Laura was afraid to be home alone with him. On January 7, the police tracked Benno down. That day, Jasmine and Benno got into the family car and went to a hardware store where they bought rags, cleaning supplies, a bucket, and hydrogen peroxide. While Benno asked Jasmine to pay for the items, they stopped at a car wash before heading home. The police arrested them there and found all the items they had purchased in the trunk of the car. The car was impounded for further investigation. The police also attempted to confiscate Benno's jacket, but he refused to hand it over. Benno was questioned again that day. Ultimately, he did not provide any useful information, and since there was no evidence against him, he was released. Although the police confiscated the cleaning kit, Benno and Jasmine decided to clean the house. Benno asked her to wear the jacket the police had asked to confiscate. She did not suspect anything and agreed. After a short while, he took the jacket off Jasmine and put it away. Later that day, the police arrested Jasmine, thinking she might be involved in the case. They questioned her for hours about Peter and Laura's disappearance, but could not find any evidence to link her to the crime. Jasmine is later confronted by the Carabinieri police several times during interrogation, including when Benno's jacket is confiscated. Her hair and skin particles are found on the jacket, forcing her to prove her innocence. She explains that she helped Benno clean the house and wore the jacket, but she was unaware of the implications and risk of harm to herself. On January 17, Maid returns to her parents' house and finds Benno there. She decides to voice her suspicions, which leads to an altercation between them. Maid suggests that Benno may be involved in Peter and Laura's disappearance. He becomes hysterical, shaking as he tries to convince her that she is mistaken. He eventually swears that he had nothing to do with it. Despite his assurances, she remains suspicious of Benno, knowing he is a good liar. Benno tries to justify his actions. However, Maid knew about his troubled relationship with their parents and his aggressive nature. He was the only one capable of causing harm to their loved ones. On January 18, Benno was the prime suspect in the case. The police suspected that he had killed his parents and then hidden their bodies. But the police lacked solid evidence. They only found a small blood stain on the car, not enough to confirm the death of his parents. However, the investigation continued. Important information came to light when Benno's phone was confiscated and examined. Geolocation data from the phone was examined on the evening when Peter and Laura went missing. The data showed that Benno had left the city and stopped near the bridge on the Adige River, where he stayed for a considerable amount of time. The police believed that he may have dumped their bodies there. This location became the focus of the search for evidence. On February 6, 2021, a search operation was launched in the Adige River. Police quickly located Laura's body. However, her husband, Peter, had been missing for more than 3 months. He was finally found on April 27, after Laura's body was discovered on the riverbank. A brown stain that looked like blood was found on the bridge over the river. Forensic experts analyzed the sample and confirmed that it was Peter's blood. Surveillance camera footage captured Benno's car on the evening of the incident as he returned from the bridge to his ex-girlfriend Martina's house, confirming that he was at the scene where the bodies were found. Peter's body was found by forensic experts in relatively good condition. A layer of algae had formed on it, slowing down decomposition, and the cold temperature helped preserve the tissues. This made it easy to spot signs of strangulation on both Peter and his wife. Marks on their necks indicated that they had been attacked from behind. The cause of death was confirmed to be strangulation, and it was determined that they had been thrown into the river after they were dead, as there was no water in their lungs. Given Benno's strong and muscular physique, he was able to overpower his elderly parents without much difficulty. After his parents' bodies were found, Benno admitted that he was involved in their deaths. On the night of the incident, he had an argument with Peter. Benno tried to avoid the argument by locking himself in his room, but his father barged in and continued the argument. In a fit of rage, Benno attacked his father with a rope and strangled him. When Laura heard the noise and went upstairs, he feared that she would call the police, so he strangled her as well. Although his confession seemed credible, his motives seemed too weak to justify such a brutal act. Benno explained that his relationship with his parents had become increasingly strained in the months leading up to the incident. Marked by frequent arguments after he moved back in with them, Benno had begun paying rent at his father's request. However, due to the constant arguments, his father decided that it would be best if Benno moved out. He began to encourage his son to rent his own apartment, but Benno refused. To pressure him to move, his father increased the rent to 700 euros, which Benno considered excessive and unfair. That evening, Peter called him a loser for spending too much time on the computer and forced him to walk the dog. Another argument broke out. This conflict escalated into a tragic situation. Benno claims that his father was the first to confront him, trying to kick him out of the house. As a result, Benno felt he had no choice but to defend himself. The investigation revealed that immediately after the murder, Benno began to create an alibi. He called his mother's cell phone, pretending to go looking for her. After the murder, he asked Martina to wash his clothes to erase any evidence. Although she handed the washed clothes over to the police, no incriminating marks were found on them. Police believe that his efforts to conceal the evidence indicate a deliberate act. Not only did Benno understand what he was doing, but he also tried to avoid consequences for this brutal crime. Benno attempted to explain his actions by claiming that he was mentally disturbed and affected by the attack. However, his calm demeanor and careful efforts to conceal evidence of the crime showed that he was fully aware of his actions. After his arrest, psychiatrists evaluated him and determined that he had a personality disorder characterized by narcissism and social problems. He had recently had frequent sudden outbursts of anger, which doctors attributed to his steroid use. Benno began taking additional medication. This led to a significant deterioration in his mental state due to hormonal changes, leading to increased aggression and a complete loss of self-control. Maid said that he would often attack her when angry and was often violent with other family members. On one occasion, she suffered multiple bruises as a result of his aggression. Even as a child, Benno tried to strangle her, but their parents were present at the time. In 2020, Benno entered a relationship with a girl named Nadine, and they moved to Germany together. A friend noted that at first, Benno was very attentive and caring. However, over time, his behavior became controlling, showing signs of selfishness and abusive tendencies. He tried to create distance between Nadine and her family, isolating her from her parents and friends, leaving her to spend most of her time alone. Things got worse when in June 2020, Nadine discovered that Benno had used her credit card without permission and stolen money from her account. This betrayal prompted Nadine to end the relationship. She called Benno's parents and insisted that they pick up their son from her apartment. His parents had to drive to pick him up. Just a day after their return, Benno made amends with Nadine, promising to pay her back and asking her parents to let him go home to Nadine. While Nadine was at work, he sent her a selfie showing him covered in blood. Benno claimed he had gotten into a fight with a friend named Dean. However, Dean was in another part of town at the time and did not see Benno. Benno sent some of the photos to his mother, Laura, who was concerned. She contacted a friend for advice. The friend suggested that Benno could be dangerous and advised Laura not to go to his apartment alone. Laura suspected that Benno's mental health had deteriorated due to his use of anabolic steroids. Benno was eventually taken away, and it was discovered that he had been self-harming due to hallucinations. After this incident, Nadine decided not to see him again, but he was discharged after only 3 days. During his stay, doctors did not have enough time to carry out all the necessary tests to diagnose his condition. It was suspected that Benno was schizophrenic, and his family insisted on further testing, but he refused and began taking medication for schizophrenia. By the time Benno's trial began, he had been diagnosed with acute polymorphic psychotic disorder rather than schizophrenia. This misdiagnosis meant that he was taking the wrong medication, which likely worsened his mental condition. While on steroids, he was taking a dangerous cocktail of drugs that affected his behavior. Immediately before the murder, Benno was released from the psychiatric hospital and returned home. During this time, his mother became extremely concerned for his safety. She hid all the knives in the house and locked the doors at night. She believed that as long as she did not provoke him, everything would be fine, so she tried to avoid arguments and limit her interactions with him. Unfortunately, this did not protect her from a tragic end. On November 19, 2022, Benno Neumayer was sentenced to life in prison. However, his lawyer quickly appealed the decision, arguing that Benno was insane due to a combination of negative factors that worsened his mental condition. To support the defense's claims, several independent medical assessments were conducted, which found him mentally stable. The prosecution pointed out that Benno acted deliberately, as he tried to create an alibi and conceal his actions. Just minutes after the murder, he called his girlfriend, pretending to be worried about his parents' absence. He ruthlessly deceived those around him, sending messages to his deceased mother, deceiving his sister and neighbors, all to escape justice. After the retrial, Benno's life sentence was upheld and remains in effect. The murders of Peter and Laura received considerable media attention in Italy and caused widespread public fear,